Gauri, you can start.
Good evening and a warm welcome to all our speakers, participants, students, scholars, and lovers of history, art, and heritage who've joined us from across India and around the world. Books are the treasured wealth of the world and the fit inheritance of generations and nations, said Henry David Thoreau. For a very long time, manuscripts have been humanity's most valuable repositories of knowledge. When it comes to India, our manuscripts are not just text alone. Filled with color, visual storytelling, and illustrations, our manuscripts are works of art in their own right, carrying religious teachings, philosophical ideas, literature, and cultural memories. Our manuscripts and other portable art have traveled far and wide. In the process, transmitting ideas of our culture and civilization, not just across regions, but across generations as well. A very warm welcome to the third day of Tamil Heritage Trust's Indology Festival, titled Caves, Courts and Beyond, Painting Traditions of India. For those of you who may be joining us today for the first time, through this journey of 6 days, we are trying to explore the rich and varied painting traditions of India across time and space. We began by looking at some of the earliest expressions of Indian art in the prehistoric rock-cut paintings in caves of central India, and then we looked at the Buddhist paintings in the Ajanta caves. Yesterday, we looked at the grand Indian mural traditions, focusing mainly on South India. Today, we'll be looking at a slightly different but equally important chapter in the history of Indian art, that of manuscripts, painted folios, and portable painting traditions. Before we move on to the main program, I'd like to give you a brief introduction about Tamil Heritage Trust. A voluntary organization started by a group of like-minded individuals almost 16 years back. The explicit objective of Tamil Heritage Trust is understanding, appreciating, disseminating, and celebrating information related to India's rich history and heritage, not just for the benefit of those who are scholarly or academically inclined, but the average enthusiastic public as well. Towards this end, THT conducts programs and events throughout the year. On the first Saturday of every month, we have our flagship event, the monthly Heritage Talk. Then we have the Indology Festival. We are on to the 7th year of this. This is a week-long online event conducted in the month of June. Then in December, we have another event, which is an in-person event conducted in Chennai to collaborate and corroborate with the Margari Isai Kacheris. We call it the Pechu Kacheri or the Oratory Concert. Apart from this, we also conduct many one-day workshops, like how to see a museum, how to see a temple, etc., where anybody can register and participate. On and off, we also have classroom sessions on a variety of topics. We also have specialized sessions for specific audience, like the school teachers of Tamil Nadu or anybody interested in becoming a docent, etc. Apart from these initiatives, we have also instituted 2 awards. The first award, named after our co-founder, is called Professor S. Swaminathan Heritage Award. This is given for individual contributions in the field of history and heritage. The second award is named after V. Venkaiah, the first official Indian epigraphist, and instituted by his great-granddaughter, Miss Sunita Madhavan. THT has been entrusted with the responsibility of administering this award, which is given for individual contributions in the field of Indian epigraphy. We will soon be announcing and putting out advertisements inviting nominations for both these awards for the year 2026. We have a YouTube channel. You can find links to all our talks here, right down to today's talk. Kindly subscribe and click the bell icon to receive notifications. These are our social media handles. This is our mailing ID. You can mail us here. If you want to be part of any of our initiatives in a voluntary capacity, you can mail us. We are a voluntary organization. We don't have any dedicated financial backing. So any kind of contributions will be welcome. You may use this QR code or ID to contribute, and the same will be appreciated. Moving on to today, the day 3 of our festival. Today's title is Manuscripts and Portable Painting Traditions. When paintings moved beyond cave walls and temple surfaces into manuscripts, scrolls, and portable works of art, they traveled across regions, courts, monasteries, libraries, and private collections, allowing artistic traditions to travel, adapt, and flourish far beyond the place where they were created. Carrying stories, sacred texts, history, and ideas across regions and generations, many of India's most refined schools of painting developed within these portable formats, where artists worked on palm leaf, paper, cloth, and scrolls with extraordinary skill and imagination. This evening, our 2 lectures explore some of these remarkable traditions and the artistic worlds that gave rise to them. Moving on to our first talk, it is titled Illuminating the Sacred, Jain Manuscripts and Miniature Paintings, and is being delivered by Dr. Pavan Jain, art historian, writer, curator, and textile researcher. Among the oldest surviving traditions of Indian miniature painting, Jain manuscript illustrations occupy a special place in the history of Indian art. Characterized by vibrant colors, intricate detailing, and rich symbolism, these paintings serve not merely as decoration, but as visual expressions of faith, devotion, and spiritual aspiration. Through carefully crafted narratives, Jain artists depicted the lives of the Tirthankaras, monks, nuns, and lay devotees, tracing journeys of renunciation, penance, enlightenment, and liberation. Beyond their religious significance, these manuscripts also offer valuable insights into the social, cultural, and artistic life of medieval India. In her talk, Dr. Pavan Jain explores the aesthetic language, symbolism, and devotional purpose of Jain manuscript painting, highlighting its enduring contribution to the history of Indian art. A little bit about her. Dr. Pavan Jain is an art historian, researcher, and textile entrepreneur whose scholarship focuses on Jain manuscript painting and the history of textiles in Indian art. She is the author of several important publications, including Kaivalyam, Jain manuscript paintings in the National Museum, Chitram Vastram, textiles and sartorial styles in the Jain manuscript paintings, and Saraswati, a Jain perspective through art. A recipient of the MAP Fellowship and currently a Tagore National Fellow, Dr. Jain is researching illustrated Mahabharata manuscripts in the National Museum. Through her research, exhibitions, teaching, and publications, she has made significant contributions to the study of Jain art and visual culture. A very warm welcome to you, Dr. Jain. We're extremely happy to have you here. Without further ado, I request you to take over the screen.
Namaste, good evening, and thank you, Gauri, for that very generous introduction. And we shall straight away move to the lecture that I'm about to deliver. And I'm going to share my screen. And I hope everybody can see the screen and I'm audible. Yeah. Okay. I'm really thankful to Tamil Heritage Trust for this honor, for inviting me to deliver this talk. And yeah, please accept my heartfelt thanks and gratitude both. Thank you very much. So let's talk about the manuscripts. What are manuscripts? Basically, these are were the handwritten texts. And in case of Jain religion, these texts can be Kalpasutra, Adi Puran, Uttaradhyan Sutra, Updeshmala, Sangrani Sutra, so on and so forth, Bhaktambar Stotra, etc., etc. And there are times when these manuscripts are also illustrated or have paintings along with the text. So these are called the illustrated manuscripts, just putting it very, very plainly. So between the 9th and 11th centuries, Jainism flourished in Western India, especially in Gujarat. And in that sense, Gujarat extended to, what is present day Maharashtra and Rajasthan also. So it was in these regions that Jainism finally established a stronghold, dictating its artistic trends in religion and secular spheres, etc. So, and hence, the Jain paintings are also commonly known as what we know them as the Gujarati or the Western Indian school of paintings. So, the development of the manuscripts is believed to owe much to the institutions of the Bhandars or the Jain libraries, as they are called. And Bhattarakas are the people who were responsible for taking care of the donations and the administrations of the temple and the related areas. And they took care of these Jain Bhandars or the libraries also. And they were always in close contact with the laity, and they, always encouraged donations for idols, for worship, and also manuscripts for spiritual enlightenment, or also termed as the Shastradan. So, evidence from many of the colophons of the manuscripts, it indicates that the patronage, in fact, for these um, illustrated or even the simple textual manuscripts, it came from the merchants or the traders flourishing from the sea and the inland trend. That the business or the trade that was being carried out, inside and outside Gujarat through seaports, etc. And the Jain kings of this Chalukyan dynasty, and then, of course, the Solankis, who ruled Gujarat and much of Rajasthan and Malwa from the 10th to, say, late 13th centuries, they were very, very energetic patrons, I would say. They built numerous temples and, of course, a lot of Jain Bhandars or the libraries. In fact, to give you an example, King Kumarpal, he ruled around 12th century. He commissioned and distributed hundreds of copies of Kalpasutra to assist in propagating the virtues of Jain faith, and was also instrumental in the founding of 21 libraries alone in Patan, which was his capital city. Right. Okay. Yeah. So these are the first folios that I'm showing you of the manuscript. These are all both done on palm leaf. So initial folios were often depicted as invocation of Goddess Saraswati. This is folio 1 from Ogha Niryukti, that's the text. And you can see the inscription also on top here. It's written Saraswati here, this is stored inside Jain Bhandar, Chani near Baroda. Okay, and belonging to 13th century. And this one is, of course, Saraswati from a Kalpasutra palm leaf, early 15th century, Jaisalmer Bhandar this is. So most of these manuscripts were, or even now, they are stored in these Jain Bhandars, and the scholars can go there and definitely um, uh, have a look at them and study them, research on them, etc. So this is folio that I'm showing you, where Namokar mantra, here you can see if you follow my cursor, which is inscribed here on the first folio. So Namokar mantra is the most important mantra used in Jainism. In this mantra, Jains salute the souls that have obtained liberation or on their way to it by gaining knowledge. So this mantra simply serves as a gesture of deep respect towards beings they believe are more spiritually advanced, and to remind followers of the Jain religion of their ultimate goal as to what is their ultimate goal, that of attaining nirvana or moksha. So the devotees often had a manuscript copied for different centers and sometimes had them decorated with illustrations. It's very important to note that the commissioning of a manuscript was considered to be a very sacred task and one that was never undertaken for any personal whims, etc. Yeah. So before we go on to studying or looking at some of the Jain manuscript folios, the illustrated ones, it is important for us to just, in 2, 3 lines, I can tell you a little bit about the Jain religion. So Jainism recognizes no, Almighty God, nor a supreme being. And it does not claim that the world came about because somebody has created it. Okay, but it only believes in 24 Tirthankars or the Jinas. The listing of that you are seeing on your screen here. And who are the Jinas or Tirthankars? Those enlightened ones, each of whom was originally born as a man, like you and me, and who nevertheless, by his own power, had attained omniscience and freedom, and who teach the way to salvation, to the suffering mankind, right? They are called the fjord makers, the Tirthankars, and that's the epithet that we give them. So, fjord makers or who make the fjord or the Tirtha, they make the way from the sansar, the phenomenal world, across the ocean of suffering to moksha or liberation. Through their intense ascetic practice, the Tirthankars, attain the four infinite qualities, in fact, that each one of us, every soul possesses, when in its purest form, which is knowledge, vision, bliss, energy. I mean, Gyan, Drishti, Anand, and Urja. No, that's what it is. And all in art, I would say, whether it is sculpture or it is a painting or it is a painted scroll, whatever, all Tirthankars are represented exactly in the same way with their cognizance. These are the symbols or the cognizance or the chinnas of which are attributed to each of the 24 Tirthankars, which is normally present at the base of the throne or the pedestal, all right, where they are standing or seated. So, barring the first Tirthankar, Adinath, he can be identified with locks of hair falling on his shoulders. Then the 23rd Tirthankar, Parshvanath, he always has a snake canopy or, a serpent hood over his head. Barring these two, all the remaining Tirthankars are represented in a similar fashion. And only in two mudras, the one that you're looking at on your screen, the Kayotsarg mudra, the total abandonment of the body, and the other one is, of course, the Gyan mudra, which is the Padmasana. Okay. So, talking about Tirthankar, it is believed that Tirthankar's soul witnesses 5 important events known as the beneficent events or the Kalyanakas. Okay, the event when Tirthankar's soul descends from the abode of the gods to be born in the mother's womb on the earth. It is called the beneficent event of descent or Chavan Kalyanak or Garbha Kalyanak. When a Tirthankar enters the mother's womb, the mother sees 14 auspicious dreams, and these are the 14 auspicious dreams that you're looking on the screen. And whatever that I'm showing you, they are all from the Jain manuscripts. All right, and this is a folio from Kalpasutra. So, and then, of course, we go on to beneficent event of birth, Jan Kalyanak. Tirthankar is born in a Kshatriya, royal Kshatriya family always. That's one of the main conditions. In fact, we will not get into that as to how this all came into being because we all know all the Shramanic religions. They came about only as a response, right, or a reaction to the then prevalent the Brahminic practices, etc. Some of them probably the excesses that were being carried out by the Brahmins in the society, and probably that was the reason that they wanted to do away with all the rituals, etc. And they only wanted to follow the path of austerity and meditation to attain moksha. Okay. Then the third Kalyanak is, of course, when Tirthankar is ready to take Diksha or initiation, and he's taken outside the city limits with a lot of fanfare, and he he pulls out his hair in Panchmushti Kesh Loshan. So that's the Diksha Kalyanak. Then fourthly, after having, wandered all around the, forests, etc., performing severe penance, austerity, he attains Keval Gyan or the omniscience. And this is the time when all the gods under Indra, they construct a special lecture hall, which is called a Samvasaran, for the omniscient Tirthankar to deliver his first sermon. Okay. And the Tirthankar founds a Dharma Tirtha, the four, the sadhu, sadhvis, lay, Jain, men and women, etc. So this is called a Keval Gyan Kalyanak, or just simply Gyan Kalyanak also. And then at this stage, it is that when the Tirthankar has kind of overpowered all kinds of, he's free of all kinds of karmic bondage, etc. And they are also known as Arihantas right now at this stage. And then during the rest of his life, Tirthankara with his disciples moves about on the earth, preaching religion, and finally attains liberation known as the Moksha Kalyanak. So this is, and why it was important for me to tell you about this, because I would say 70, if maybe 80% of the Jain manuscript paintings that we have today, they belong to the Jain Shwetambar text known as Kalpasutra. And Jin Charit is the one major portion of Kalpasutra, whereby we learn about the journey of Tirthankar. And these, the Panch Kalyanakas are the, in fact, that's the main theme of the Jin Charit section of the Kalpasutra. Okay. So this is a vivid Tirth Chitra, it says, where you can see the Tirthankar sitting in the center. And of course, there are different pilgrimage sites that you can see here. So between the two main sects of the Jain faith, the Shwetambars were always more prolific in commissioning of the manuscripts, although Digambars, their work has also contributed amply to the miniature art in India. But I mean, all the manuscript traditions put together, it can not, match to the number of manuscripts and the illustrated manuscripts that have been produced by the Shwetambar sect. So now we will talk a little bit about the history of Jain painting. In fact, we were witness to these very, very beautiful Setan Vasal Jain paintings, the mural paintings that yesterday Professor Binoy Behel also, we had the opportunity to listen to him about these beautiful paintings. So before this, in fact, archaeologists have found extensive, rock-hewn caves, Jain caves rather, with relief sculptures, and some of them have also remnants of painting, dating from 1st century BC, which are present in Udaygiri. They are called the Udaygiri caves in Odisha. Then we also have a literary reference of Jain painting in the 11th century CE Parv Charit, which in the, I think it is 7th Sarga, where the 22nd Tirthankar, Jina Neminath, there is a mention of his painting being, decorated on the wall. So now we are looking at these murals inside the Jain caves from Setan Vasal near Pudutukottai, near Trichinapalli in southern India, dating back to the 7th century CE. And if we look at the physiognomy, the faces, the physiology, etc., the lotuses, the buds, they are easily comparable with Ajanta murals. We are looking at the flower gatherers. They are portrayed in very, very elegant postures and proportions, having great charm. The stalks of the lotuses they carry, the petals of the blooming flowers, and the buds are very, very, wonderfully, they are realistic here. Then we also talk about how did the traditions of Jain manuscript paintings came about? How did it come about? So, continuing the tradition of Ajanta, we are looking at the Mahajanak Jatak from Cave 1, Ajanta. At Ellora, wall paintings of the Kailash temple here, 8th century, we are looking at the figure of Lakshmi here. So, this is, of course, total 3/4 profile we are looking at. And this also is a 3/4 profile, but there is a certain shift that has happened. The figures have become more elongated. The features are more pointed. If you look at the nose, etc., very, very pointed nose. And the most important part is the further chin here is totally missing, other than this little part above, just below the eye. And of course, a little part of the forehead is also here. So, in fact, many art historians have proved that the Ellora tradition ripened and developed into miniature paintings of Jain scriptures. And this distinctive style soon spread to other parts of India, like, say, Alchi in Ladakh, if you have seen some of the Alchi murals, which again Professor Behel showed us yesterday. Uh, this is, of course, the Buddhist art that we are talking about, and also to countries outside India, like Burma, etc. And this eventually became a canon of Western Indian school of painting, which is not surprising given the school's very historic preference for linearity. So we will see that the figures and other features that we encountered in Ellora paintings, they are pretty much present. In fact, this portion eventually disappears, and that's where you get the further eye or the protruding eye that we have in the Jain paintings. So that was about the painting style. Now, the very tradition of Jain miniature art, right? How they came about to be depicted inside the manuscript folios. That tradition, I would say, is as old as that of Buddhist art and also developed under similar conditions. The school of Pal paintings, in fact, heavily influenced the Jain manuscript paintings in terms of the material, format, and also subject matter. Subject matter, when I say, of course, the Jain manuscripts are related to the Jain canons as such. Okay. But eventually, Jain art, like Jain literature, also developed its own distinctive presence, both in its iconography and its stylistic character. So this is the one of the Buddhist Pal manuscript, Ashtsasrika Prajna Paramita, that I'm trying to show you here on the screen. So, in fact, in the earliest extant Jain paintings, the depiction of the deities served as a talismanic rather than narrative purpose. In fact, it truly followed the Buddhist tradition of painting, whereby when you're looking at the deity here, the Prajna Paramita in the center of the folio, there is no narration related to the picture that we are looking at, but they mostly had these paintings done on the folios for the devotees to look at them with veneration and pay their respects. Now we are looking at one of the earliest palm leaf paintings, and it comes from the Shatkhandagam, which is the oldest known Digambar text, traceable to almost 2nd century. And Dhavala or Dhaval is an exclusive commentary which is written on this particular text by Acharya Veer Sen in the 9th century CE. And it is written in Prakrit, alternating with Sanskrit. In fact, this has survived as the Mudbidri manuscript, which was used by the regional Jains not for reading or study, but as an object of devotional worship for centuries. As I said about the paintings also, they were mainly object of devotion as such earlier. Okay. In fact, this is also one of the earliest manuscripts which shows Bahubali, who was a son of the first Tirthankar, Adinath, flanked by his two sisters, Brahmi and Sundri. And they are shown removing the vegetative growth. If some of you have visited Shravan Belgola, you will understand that when Bahubali was standing in Kayotsar Mudra, all kinds of vegetative growths, grew around him, and snakes, etc. All those were kind of enveloping his body as such, because he was so engrossed in his meditation, right? So here you can see his two sisters removing the vegetative growth that has entangled Bahubali's legs. So Brahmi is at the two, the sisters are Brahmi, who's also attributed to the Brahmi script. And while Sundari is, responsible with knowledge of mathematics and numbers, which is Ank Vidya. So it is also very, it's a well-known fact that Adinath, in fact, taught all kinds of uh, I would say, all the vidyas, in fact, he taught to the mankind, and these were, just two of them. Okay. And when you're looking at the costume or the hairstyle, etc., you can easily see that there is a very important South Indian influence that you can see from this particular painting here. This is one folio from palm leaf manuscript. And this is an actual historic event that took place in the time of Hemchandracharya, a very renowned scholar. In fact, he was a polymath, I can say that, around 11th century. And at the request of his patron, King Jaisimha Siddharaj, he wrote a grammar, which was called a grammar book, which was called the Siddhema grammar. And here you can see it is being carried in procession on an elephant's back. In this miniature here, you can see the king standing with his hands folded in front of the Tirthankar's image. And it is proposed that probably this is the temple, Rai Vihara, which was built by Jaisimha Siddharaj himself. Okay. And on the right, you can see a procession in which probably the king is seated on top, and there is a Sthapnacharya, or the stand on which the grammar book has been kept with the umbrella on top. And there is, of course, a chori bearer at the back, and a drummer is seen with the procession here. Now, I will tell you a very interesting fact about this particular incident. If you're looking at the top panel, this is actually the episode that I just spoke about, the 12th century episode of parading the Siddhema grammar on the elephant back. So the name of the elephant was Shrikar. All right, was that at that time when that procession had been carried out, and in fact, till today, and this, of course, some of you may recognize, this is a Patan Patola. And even today, this particular motif is known by the name Shrikar Bhat, it is called. And this is an 18th century copy of the manuscript folio that I showed you just now. All right, and made on the textile. And this was exported to Sulawesi in Indonesia. And there it was held in very, very high esteem. It was considered as an heirloom for, all those who possess this. And below, I'm trying to show you a very modern copy of this done by the Salvi brothers in Patan today in 2003. So, making of the Jain manuscripts. So, I think I mentioned earlier also, they were first written on palm leaf panels, and the completed manuscript was inserted between these richly wooden, decorated wooden covers. And then there were these holes for rubrication in the palm leaves with the thread. The manuscript, in fact, leaves were also guarded by these wooden patlis, or the pattikas as they are called. And of course, sometimes you would have the cardboard covers also, which were painted or covered with printed or cotton or embroidery. So these are, I'm going to show you some of the wooden book covers, or the manuscript wooden patlis, and because they were also very highly decorated with paints, etc. So here we are again looking at the live scenes of Bahubali, some part of it, the battle between the two brothers, Bharat and Bahubali, and then in the lower here, this other patli, the complementary patli of the set, here we can see the the penance or the tap of Bahubali, which is both painted on the wooden book cover. And they are from the Jaisalmer Bhandar, almost dating to 1122 to 1154, one of the earliest wooden book covers. Okay. So, and these are also some of the earliest surviving miniatures from the Western India. All right. Okay. This is another set of book covers which are plain from outside. And inside, of course, there are these two long wooden strips which are painted in very crisp and graphic detail. And this again is a scene related to an actual historic event where there was going to be a debate or a disputation between the Shwetambar monk, whom you see here moving in a procession, Dev Suri, and then his Digambar rival, Kumuchandracharya. Okay. And this disputation is said to have taken place again at Patan in Gujarat at the court of the King Siddharaj, in which Shwetambar monk, in fact, emerged triumphant. The way the painter has, laid it out against a very rich red background, in fact, we are witnessing all this very stirring happenings. I'm not going to get into the each detail. You can see very highly animated musicians and dancers here, which are, there in front of the Acharya here. And in fact, they are all moving. They move from Ashapalli to Patan. Ashapalli is the old name for Ahmedabad today. Yeah. Then this is another set. Of course, this is not the set actually. This is one wooden patli and this is another one. But there is some commonality. That's why I put them together. So there is a Kirti Mukha here in the center and same you can see here also. Okay. So yeah, so what you can see here, this meandering, these roundels, the creepers, right? So this is in fact this patli embodies some of the oldest decorative elements in Indian art and almost are comparable to paintings that we find at Ajanta. If you look at the delineation of the elephants here, and I've put the elephant from the ceiling panel of Ajanta, they're almost comparable. Almost. So we can also say that somehow in some sense, it reveals the traditions to which these 12th century Jain artists were heirs to as such. Okay. And the design in here, you can see it is defined by the use of this continuous meandering lotus stem, forming a series of roundels, each of which has a figurative motif inside, right? And there are some lotuses also in between for the infilling of the space, and the Kirti Mukha is very important here. But in fact, this is you encounter this motif all along Indian art, from ancient till modern also. And this is a mythical face which serves as a protective presence intended to terrify non-believers and also to ward off evil. And of course, there are many backstories to it. And here at regular intervals, you can see a flowing stem and the lotuses. At the same time, there are some human figures. You can see a lady playing on the flute here. And if you look at the bottom here, you can see very clearly, there is a pair of birds in one of the roundels. And what do you see here? There is a giraffe here, right? Now, giraffe, we all know, is not an indigenous animal in India, right? And it is also important for us to know that giraffe we encountered even on one of the platforms at the Konark Sun Temple. And it has been observed that the political and trade relations might have brought these rare and exotic animals to interested and wealthy individuals or kings as such. And we also know from history that a present of zebra was made to, Mughal Emperor Jahangir, in fact. So we have this very famous painting of zebra done by Mansoor, who was a very famous coat painter in the in the atelier of Jahangir as such. And these, in fact, this meandering creeper, it is not a new thing. In fact, we have seen, we encounter these right from, I would say, Shunga period. No, if we look at the Bharut Stupa or Amravati Stupa, these meanders we encounter everywhere. Then we come to the paper manuscripts. Okay. So it is very important for us to know that the painting in Western Indian style was not flexible to any kind of changes, right? Because the very format, everything was considered to be very, very sacrosanct. And the integral tenets of the style remained almost unaltered from the 12th century. And any kind of deviation from the set norm was not entertained. Why? Because probably for the fear of it, losing that magical religious character, as this was the very essence of the painting. So, and likewise, the artist adhered to the traditions and conventions of the manuscript paintings. So when we look at these unfinished, the top folio, unfinished folio, the scribes first demarcated areas for the text and illustration. Once the text was written, the panel was given to the artist who worked very methodically. The language used most of the time was Prakrit, and the script was Jain Nagari or Ardhmagadi, but all right. And also, when we are looking at this folio, it can be easily inferred that from the when we are looking at these sketches, that after the scribe had left the space blank for painting, the artist made these diagrammatic notes for painting or these thumbnails, etc. All right. And these were mainly for his own guidance while he was, going over all the other work. And it is also to be presumed thus that the scribe and the painters were not the same persons. And the page numbers were placed consistently on the reverse to the right bottom. A fact that many, in fact, Western scholars have confused in the past, as whenever they are, putting the page numbers in the catalogs, etc. Sometimes they get the front and the back mixed up as such. Now, a very interesting feature that I want to highlight here. When we were looking at the Jain palm leaf paintings, there was this Granthi Sthan in the center, no, the hole for the perforation for binding the cord, which went through that hole. But it is interesting to note that in paper manuscripts, these two folios, there are these big red circles in both margins and a third one in the center, showing the survival of the palm leaf tradition to allow for the Granthi Sthan, though no such hole is required. All right, because we can easily stack the paper folios together. Sometimes you can also bind them together, etc. So the presence of the string hole in the form of a dot thus almost survives as a vestigial ornament. This perpetuation of such a convention, a memory of the past practice, and the continuation of this sacrosanct format is also a reminder of the static nature of the Jain manuscript painting tradition, in fact, or the manuscript tradition for that matter, at least till the 15th century or early 16th century also, I would say that. Then let's talk about some of the typical features of the Jain paintings. So I have mentioned some before, but they exhibit marked peculiarities, I would say, in the delineation of the human form. The most conspicuous, of course, being those of the 3/4 profile here. So you're almost looking the face in complete profile, other than this further eye and some part of the very tiny part of the forehead, which is visible here, right? And here the protruding eye or the further eye kind of juts out very, very unnaturally. And of course, the long pointed nose. All the features are very, very pointed as such, okay, which kind of projects outside the line of the cheek. then broad chest, very, very broad chest, and attenuated waist. In fact, so much so that at times the distinction between the male and the female is very difficult to discern as such. Okay. The postures are most of the time very, they appear to be very tortuous and awkward, especially when seated or sometimes lying down and standing also. But the very important, the commerce that we witness in these manuscript folios is the textiles which are depicted, all right, that exhibit the then contemporary trade that was flourishing in Gujarat and the products that were being exported westward to Western Asia, Egypt, and eastwards to Indonesia. Uh, Another characteristics is of course, the garments look very, very stiff and heavily starched in all the paintings here. And also, I would not shy away from saying that some of the miniatures are also overcrowded with details, uh, mostly flat primary colors, devoid of any kind of perspective or depth. So in that sense, I would say they are more pictographic, right? The attention is to, in fact, tell the or narrate the entire scene in the whatever little space which has been provided to the artist as such. And again, to reiterate, the further eye is the most important, which is I'm talking about this particular eye, no, the further eye, which is the most important characteristic, which of course then you encounter in murals also later, and in other secular paintings also, manuscript paintings from the same region, say Vasant Vilas, and then some Hindu manuscripts also, Bal Gopal Stuti, same kind of, further eye can be seen. So in fact, it all it was almost, it became the uh, norm of that time, and that this is how the paintings were being done, all right. And this lasted around the I would say late 16th and early 17th century, I would say. There were numerous notable changes that came about under the influence of the Mughal school of painting, which seemed almost to be the last development that took place in the Jain miniature paintings. Okay. The colors you can see are very, very flat primary colors. They were all mineral and natural colors. The gold was used very, very profusely. As I said, the traders and the merchants were the patrons, and there was no dearth of the money that was flowing in as donations. So plenty of gold as gold leaf forming the foundation of the painting, or yellow gold paint, which takes almost the place of gold as representing the human flesh in the paintings. Then other colors, black, pure pearly white, red, green, pink, etc., they were used. In later manuscripts, in fact, blue color was obtained from lapis lazuli and was also which was employed in these paintings. And sometimes this particular feature is also used in uh, approximately dating an undated illustrated manuscript, because there's a certain time period only after which the use of lapis lazuli as color, blue color, was employed in these manuscript illustrations. The writing is on each side of the folio, and the folios are flipped over like this, horizontally, I would say, as the text was read. And the last page, of course, was the colophon, which would normally have the date of execution along with other details such as the patron, sometimes the artist's name, very, very rarely though, mostly under whose, uh, uh, grace. No, normally the acharya who was kind of supervising this kind of work, his name is there, provenance is there, etc., etc. So sometimes you will find that since there were many copies which were being made from the older ones, in the colophon you will find the colophon is also sometimes uh, copied as it is, or sometimes the date is copied as it is without making any change. So in such manuscripts, you can easily find out that, okay, at that time, the paper manuscript had not even come into being. So you easily know that this is the palm leaf period and not a paper, not the time of paper manuscript. So now we shall quickly look at the Panch Kalyanakas that we spoke about earlier. This is, of course, the Garbh Kalyana, right? And where the mother of the Tirthankar is seeing the 14 auspicious dream here. In the center, you have this figure of Lakshmi here. Kalpsutra is a canonical text which was written by Bhadrabahu of the Cheda class in the 3rd century CE. And of course, amongst the Shwetambar Jains, this is a very, very important text. And there are very rich illustrations that we get from Kalpsutra. And then there is, this is the Garbh Kalyanak again from Kalpasutra. And there is an interesting story about the exchange of embryo of Mahavir from Brahmani, Devnanda's womb to Kshatrani, Trishla's womb, because I think I stated earlier that it was Tirthankar could only be born in royal Kshatriya family. And this was also one of the ways of kind of, kind of not accepting the supremacy of the Brahmanism of at that time, since all the Shramanic cults were very much against this particular sect at that time. Okay, and you can see here very, very realistic depiction of the embryo that you can see. And Harin Gameshi, or Harin means deer, or sometimes goat-faced. He is the commander of army for Indra, and he, on his orders, he carries out this exchange of embryo. Then the second Kalyanak is the Janma Kalyanak. Here you can see the mother, is half lying down with the baby Tirthankar here. And here Indra, who comes down and takes on his 5 forms, and he takes the baby Tirthankar on Mount Meru for his first illustrious bath. And of course, here these are the 2 other gods who are trying to pour water over the Tirthankar here. Now here you can see this overhanging canopy, the spittoons, the wooden bed. All these reflect to the even now prevalent, in any Gujarati household. If you go, you will encounter these articles. Then the third Kalyanak is that of Diksha Kalyanak. Here you are looking at the king giving away all his jewels to mendicants, and he's taken, outside the city limits in a palanquin here with all the fanfare. Then here he's removing his hair in Panchmushti Keshlochan in 5 fistful, and Indra is receiving them. So we see that Indra is the supreme god, in the Vedas. But here in Jain pantheon, he has a very subservient role to play, that of attending to the Tirthankar, etc. And similar stories you will find in Buddhism also, where you will find Bodhisattva or Buddha flanked by Indra and Brahma on 2 sides. Then the fourth Kalyanak is that of Gyan Kalyanak, or the Keval Gyan Kalyanak. When the Tirthankar attains omniscience, Indra, along with the help of other gods, he prepares this very beautiful assembly hall, which is called the Samvasaran, which has 3 levels, right? And 3 ramparts. In fact, I could say that, as made of gold, silver, and gems. And in the center, he's seated with 4 gates here to deliver his sermon. And in fact, we know about Hindu religion, a Hindu temple. What is it? A house of God, body of God, or God himself, or probably his, different emanations, or macrocosm in the form of microcosm. But when we talk about Jain temple, on the other hand, the Jain temple came to be regarded as the replica of this celestial assembly hall, or the Samvasaran of Jinnah, where he would deliver the sermon. So here I'm trying to show you one of the Samvasaran temples that is there inside the Ramtek Jain temple in Maharashtra. Then the last one, at the end of his life, his soul entirely emancipated from karmic defilement, and the body rests forever in the bliss on the location of emancipation, which is called the Siddhashila, attaining moksha, or known as the Moksha Kalyanak. So this is the Siddhashila at the top of the universe. And I think I'm going to talk about that. This quickly, I thought I could show you the 3 different folios. This is from Gujarat. They are all depicting the same scene, that of Garbh Kalyanak. Right here, Trishla is seeing 14 auspicious dreams here in this. This is a Jaunpur Kalpasutra. This is Mandu Kalpasutra, and this is from Gujarat. So here you can see the fine block printing that you can see on the dhotis of the king and the queen, and the fine diaphanous cotton of Gujarat is very much visible here. Vis-a-vis, we have very coarse cotton that we are seeing here, and also there is a cultural, insight that we get looking at this folio. Mandu was being ruled by an Islamic ruler at that time. This is 1439. This particular folio is from that period, right? And you can see a single screen in between the male quarters and the female quarters. So this again kind of reflects the societal custom or the tradition that was prevalent at that time. And also, I would like to highlight one feature about the Jaunpur Kalpasutra. This was Jaunpur was being ruled by Sharki dynasty, which was founded by the then Sultan Malik Sarwar, probably of African origin. So hence, if you look at the skin color here, the physiognomy also, and the skin color both. So accordingly, same kind of change that you can see from these. But other than these very minute changes, the very depiction of the Tirthankar or the parents, etc., it all remains the same. There is absolutely no change as such. Then Kalkacharya Katha, in fact, is another non-canonical text which is appendix to Kalpasutra. And this is the story of monk Kalka, in fact, who sought the aid of the Shahi or the Shaka rulers who were foreigners beyond the Indus, and to defeat the local king, Gardbil, in fact. So here you can see this is the border that we are looking at of the manuscript. And Shahi soldiers or the Shaka soldiers can be seen in all kinds of different activity. And this is an interesting episode where the Kalkacharya, he's the Kalkacharya, where he's trying to retrieve a ball which has fallen into a well when these Shahi soldiers were playing. And in fact, we can draw a parallel about this story with Dronacharya and the Hastinapur princes, right? So likewise, you will find many overlaps in these Dharmakathas, etc., between all the three ancient Indian religions, be it Hindu, Buddha, or for that matter, even Jain, right? So Gujarat always had a very long-standing, contact through its textile trade with ports of Arabian Peninsula and the Red Sea. And then, of course, there was the establishment of the Muslim Sultanate, in fact, in around 1396, right? Which further strengthened the, ties with West Asia, and especially with the Mamluk Empire of Egypt. And that's why these contacts led to lot of stylistic and technical innovations in art and architecture. So the artist almost represented the Shahi kings in pictorial terms with this new figural type, almost mimicking the local Sultanate people, right? In terms of the physiognomy, especially, they are depicted with the Mongol face here, right? And they are wearing those kind of costumes also, long robes, the taklavats or the kabas, and long, turban with the kula in the center, like almost the Pathan's headgear. So in short, I can tell you the Kalkacharya story here. He was born in the kingdom of Dhara and then he was initiated. Then his sister was abducted by Gardbil, the king of Ujjain here, so which you are seeing here in this particular folio. You can see the tie-dye textiles very prominently visible in these folios here. And here you can see total lack of perspective. This man is supposed to be running on the other side of the horse, and So you can see the flatness of the painting here very clearly. Then, of course, Kalka seeks the help of the Shahi king. And, when he retrieves that ball from the well, the Shahi soldiers take him to the Shahi king. And there he unfolds his plan as to how they can defeat Gardbil, who had abducted his sister. And he would put the Shahi king on the throne of Ujjain. That's how it is. The one interesting thing, I think I'm running out of time, but I want to tell you. This is the cloud collar, huh? And the the gown that is he's wearing is called the taklavat. So the cloud collar, in fact, symbolizes in Chinese culture as a good fortune and heavenly blessings, or the communication between, in fact, the heaven and earth. And it also depicts abundance and auspicious future. And also, thus, it represents a wearer as if he's surrounded and protected by heavenly forces. And you can see these, pointed beard, the long braid here at the back, almost mid calf length, the shoes, the khufs, the taklavat here, the headgear, the taj kula, etc. They all are very, very different from the local or indigenous costumes, etc. And here again on his throne, you can see some tie-dye pattern here. Very interesting. But see, the Shahi soldiers and the king are shown with these sidelong glances, not with further eye, which was purely, reserved for the local Jains or the other laity, etc. Then this is in continuation with this. Kalka knew how to, break the magic spell of Gardbil, who owned a magic she-ass, and when it started to bray, everybody around was supposed to, get killed. But with the help of the Shahi soldiers, he fills up the mouth of the she-ass, and that's how they are able to break the magic spell, and he's able to rescue his sister. And in fact, if you look at this Merlot design here, so that's why I say Jain paintings are very pictographic. In very little space, they say a lot. Just by placing this design, you can make out that Gardbil is sitting inside his fort, because always on the fort walls you will see this particular motif, and he's performing this magic havan here inside, right? So this is about the Jain painting, and here the Gardbil, the king, has been brought out as a captive. Very clearly, you can see. And Shahi has been installed on the throne of the Ujjain here. So, in fact, it is only after 57, at 57 BC, when Vikramaditya, took over the throne of this particular place. And that's how we have the Vikram Samvat, that it starts from there. And then now let's talk about some of the, yeah. So when we are talking about the main folio, the religious, characters are there, and there was no way the artist could deviate from the set norms. But when it came to decorating the borders or the wooden patlis, the artists were not hidebound by these hieratic, religious considerations governing the main field of the manuscript. And he could give vent to his imagination. So what you can see here, dancers, musicians, wrestlers, animal trainers, sometimes also couples seated under a pavilion, or, improvised motifs from architecture, from Islamic carpets, etc., etc. So the typical depiction of the dancers in the folio borders, uh, I mean, you can see highly animated stances here in these border uh, decorations. Then this is a very interesting, these are different borders that I'm trying to show you. Just as we saw the various dancers in borders, painting of the oldest Rag and Raginis also are illustrated in the margins of the Kalp Sutra. In fact, this is 1475, another Kalp Sutra only. So I would say the Ragmala paintings is an unique concept of Indian art, where there is a confluence of music, literature, painting The poet, in fact, gives description of the raga in meter. There are dhyan mantras that, for each rag that the singer, first meditates upon and then sings. And similarly, the dhyan mantras are meditated upon by the artist also. And then the image that he, conjures in his mind is then painted. So these are collectively some of the secular subjects that were being painted as the borders and inside these religious paintings. Now, quickly, I can show you one folio from Uttaradhyayan Sutra, Shwetambar text, which normally talks about how the conducts of the munis or the acharyas or the teachers, how they are supposed to be. So here you can easily see that the monk is, facing frontally, absolutely absorbed in his meditation, whereas there are two dancers on his two sides who are, they add to the distraction. But uh, the monk is totally, unaffected by all that is happening. Yeah. So it kind of beautifully illustrates the strength of will that a monk must, exert to honor the vows of chastity. Then there is another Digambar manuscript, Adi Puran. And I would say the Digambar manuscripts are, if we compare them with the other earlier folios that we have seen, they are in some way, you would find them little bit folkish, or the paintings are a little bit done in a crude style, right? Okay, so this is the first folio. Again, you will see the inscription of Namokar Mantra. In the center, you have Adinath, the first Tirthankar, bull his cognizance, and he's being fanned by two chori bearers here. And then this is the second folio where you have the image of Saraswati here. So if you look at the figure of Saraswati, uh, she holds all the normal attributes that you will encounter when we are looking at any Saraswati in the Hindu temple. But if just the broad chest, etc., almost you are made to think that probably it is the sorry, I think. Yeah, okay. Almost appears like a male, other if you were not, careful enough to notice the highly developed breasts here. Then this is another folio where the mother of the Tirthankar is seeing 16 auspicious dreams. Huh? Because in the Digambar sect, it is believed that the mother of the Tirthankar sees 16 in place of 14 auspicious dreams. So now here Lakshmi is also one of those auspicious dreams. And here again, I will point out that the difference between the male and the female is very much lost here. Then now a series of illustrated manuscript, in fact, Western and Northern India, in fact, in the late 16th and 17th century, show the pervasive influence of Mughal court style. So this is the old palm leaf that I showed you, and this is a Kalp Sutra folio that I'm showing you from the 17th century. So artists kind of blended the elements of Mughal realism with the established, Jain canons. And the result was often termed as the popular or provincial Mughal painting. It was a mix of the medieval Western Indian Jain painting and proto-modernist Mughal style as such. In fact, a lot of Jain artists had shifted from the use of three-quarter profile and protruding eye to the use of full profile, as you see in this particular painting. And the protruding eye was totally missing here. And also, if you look at the costumes, they are almost, mimicking the Mughal court dress here. If I were not to tell you that this is a folio from Kalpasutra, you could easily mistake it for an early Mughal painting as such. Yeah. So, in fact, these are some of the major changes that came about due to the influence of Mughal school of painting, which seemed to be the almost last developments that took place. Then, if I don't know, Gauri, do I have time? Another 5, 10, 5
Yeah,
minutes?
you can continue.
Okay,
That's okay.
thank you. We'll talk about the Jain cosmological scheme, which is here. superimposed on human body in an attempt to homologize, microcosm with macrocosm. The human body, you can see, is divided into the adholok, which is the bottom part, into 7 layers of hell, which are depicted. Then the central portion, the madhyalok or the middle world, which represents the Jambudvip with the human and animal population, etc. This is a small disk that you see. And then, of course, you have the Urdhvalok. The area above this disk is called the Urdhvalok, or the upper world of the gods, which extends from the chest to beyond the head, ending into the Siddhashila. This is the one. Here, you can see Siddhashila here, which is, I'm shown you here, where the Tirthankars ultimately, go and reside there for forever, I would say that. So this is how the Jain cosmos is divided, and you can further see here. This is another manuscript folio showing the same representation of the triple world in the form of the cosmic man. So the text which talks about the cosmos is the Sangrahini Sutra. Okay, it talks about Jain cosmology. It also describes different classes of gods, hells, the leshas, the states of mind, which are 6 in number. So the depiction of cosmic man is often found in Jain temples, precisely to remind the worshippers of where they are in the entire, theme of the universe and what they should be striving to do in this life. So you can see we occupy a very, very small portion of the cosmos. And there is this whole big, long journey where you are only after traversing this path can you attain nirvana here. All right. So here you can clearly see the cosmos in the shape of a spindle, the upper portion where all the gods are residing, the middle portion, the disk, and the lower portion, and a cone and a shape of a spindle that you can see here very, very clearly. So here all the different classes of the gods are there. Here in the center you have Jambudvip. I'll show you another painting. It's clearly you can see from here. So this is the central portion, the disk that we were looking at in that Lok Purush diagram. And this is the waste of the universe, which was I showed you on the Lok Purush, which is formed by Mount Meru, and it is surrounded by different islands and seas as such, that of the earth, right? And there are different classes of gods that at the lowest level, Bhavnadipatis, the Asuras, the Nagas, the Vayantaras, the Rakshasas, Kinnaras, Gandharvas, Jyotishkas, gods which are suns, moons, planets, etc., etc. The celestials, I would say. And of course, the men, the animals, they all reside here. And Meru is the golden mountain. In fact, which figures very prominently in all the 3 religions. It's a subject of different myths and texts as such. So the geography of the earthly worlds, in fact, around Mount Meru consists of a central continent called the Jambudvipaya, right? And this is surrounded by range of other islands, Salt Sea, then Dhatuki Dweep, then another Black Sea, then Pushkar Dweep, etc. So the third one, Pushkar Dweep, in fact, it is kind of blocked by high-ranging mountains called the Manushottar Parvat, and beyond which human beings cannot reach. And that's why it's called the 2.5 islands or Adhai Dweep diagram, where the man, can be seen, or where the Tirthankars are born and they are, venerated. Okay. This is another Yashodhar Charit, Digambar manuscript, Dharma Kathas in the format that of a story within a story, wherein the life of King Yashodhar is unveiled. So the main tenet of the story is non-violence, and through these stories, the general public is reminded of the main teachings of the Jain religion through a non-canonical text. So mainly preferred by Digambars, and also here you can see the old manuscript. This is now, I mean, I think by now we have trained our eyes to discern. This is an earlier manuscript belonging to probably 15th or early 16th century, where you can see all the main characteristics of the Jain paintings, the further eye, the angularity, all that is visible here. Whereas this is a much later copy of the same text, Yashodhar Charit, right? And it is in the Lakma. So this you can see almost middle of the 17th century, and no further eye. There is some kind of rotundity, and of course the colors are still flat. So some of the features of the old style have still been retained. But look at the costume here, the angarkha or the jama and the chudi pajama and atpati turban that he's wearing, very, very interesting. Because and just by looking at these two paintings of the same text done in different time period, you can easily make out the difference. Then this is an old Jain didactic text, Updesh Mala, and this is a colophon page that we are looking at. Here you can see the date, etc. It kind of informs us that it was prepared for one merchant Nemidas in 1678 CE in the city of Bijapur. Probably was a Shwetambar, because this is, we can, just by looking at the illustration, we can make out it is a Shwetambar image. Probably he was a Shweta, because normally in this part of the country, most of the time, it is in the Digambar sect, which is more prevalent. So probably he was a Shwetambar visiting Bijapur. The style of painting is definitely Deccan, the form of attire, the donors, which are shown as the chauri bearers on the two sides. They wear contemporary style costumes with frontal pleating, fashionable in South India. With you can see the Atpati turban of the Mughal period or Akbari period, I would say that. Yeah, it is absolutely that period. And of course, the gold jewelry and pearl jewelry, etc., displaying their wealthy character and southern influence. And we can also make out this is the image of Shantinath because of the deer as his cognizance, which is present at the pedestal. Then this is the last I wanted to show you, Sri Bhaktambar Stotra, another text, which is kind of, it is important for both the sects. It has 48 verses written in Sanskrit, which again is different from the earlier texts that were mostly written in Prakrit, and written by Acharya Manatunga in 7th century. In fact, there is a story behind the text that he was put under arrest in 48 chambers, under locks and chains by King Bhoj in Ujjain. And in the prison, Acharya Manatunga entered the realms of Adinath, and or you can also call him Rishabnath as such, and he started the prayer. And the chants and the prayers of the Acharya brimmed with lot of energy, kind of it opened this kind of energy was generated that the locks automatically opened and he was freed. And that's why there are these 48 stanzas only in Bhaktambar Stotra. And this is from Jaipur, illustrated copy of Bhaktambar Stotra from executed in Jaipur in Rajasthan. So typical costumes you can see of Mughal period. The marble architecture is very prevalent, showing the local influence, and the niches in the wall, look at these arch niches that you see. They clearly show Mughal influence in architecture. The interior and the exterior, which are kind of separated by curtains here. And there is some emphasis on landscape also. These again, in fact, these are the typical characteristics of Persian paintings adopted by Mughal paintings, and now, having influence over Jain paintings also. Right, very, very interesting. The further eye is totally missing. The painting is done in popular Mughal style. In fact, the borders, this is also very interesting. The size of the painting has increased. These are not those small manuscript, small palm leaf folios or those other paper folios that we saw earlier. And how you would have the hashias in Mughal paintings. Similarly, these variegated floral border can you see here very, very clearly, right? So in fact, there is no angularity of the features, the etc. etc. They are totally missing here. So in this sense, I would say we have seen the evolution of Jain manuscript paintings from palm leaf, wooden patlis, paper, the border decorations, the various different Jain texts, both Shwetambar and Digambar, and also the various influences that have worked on the development of these paintings. With this, I'm going to conclude my lecture and I'm going to stop sharing. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Jain. Thank you for those amazing visuals and amazing insight. And you made us realize how devotion, painting, scholarship, and visual storytelling went together to create these timeless masterpieces. And we also, we generally tended to think of Jain manuscripts as just religious texts. Only now we've understood that they have a social and the cultural context, and the evolution of it was so very clearly explained. I think we'll move on to the question answer session. Today, our question answer session will be moderated by Kishore Mahadevan, an engineer by profession and a heritage enthusiast by choice. Kishore is one of the oldest and core members of Tamil Heritage Trust. Warm welcome to you, Kishore. Yeah, take over.
Thank you, Gauri. And Dr. Pawan Jain, excellent lecture and really widened our knowledge of, or our ignorance of.
Yeah, made us realize, we come face to face with our ignorance.
So we will start with the painting traditions. You mentioned that the Kalpa Sutra being the canonical text, the life and teachings of the Tirthankaras. But was there a painting tradition text in Jaina tradition? The equivalent of, let's say, Vishnu Dharmotara Purana. Did the Jain manuscript painters have any such reference text that spoke about the painting traditions?
I would say Jain texts have spoken about aesthetic aspect of art, definitely. There is a mention of the Navrasas. In fact, the Shantarasa, features in one of the old Anuyog Sutra, which is a Jain text, which talks about all the rasas and how the painting, I will not say, it talks about the Sapsuras also, but I'm not very sure if they talk about the painting also as much. But I definitely know they talk about the aesthetics of art in general. Yeah, I know that. Yes.
Just 1 minute. I think, Kishore, you need to up your decibel level. They are not able to hear you so clearly.
Okay. Is this better?
I think in the Zoom it's quite clear. Maybe in YouTube they are not able to. Okay, just make it a little loud. That's
What is the earliest Jain manuscript of any kind, right? Where would you place that?
So the extant Jain manuscript will be a palm leaf folio. It's a Kalpa Sutra and Kalkachari Katha, which is present in Ahmedabad, Chani, near Baroda, I would say. And then a folio of that same Kalpa Sutra, as I said, Kalkacharya Katha is the appendix to Kalpa Sutra. It is present in the Asiatic Society in Bombay. Yeah, so that's the oldest, and I will date to 12th century. Yeah. And the wooden patlis, of course, they are 1125, something like that. Yeah, that I showed you.
Right. And was there a difference in the painting media or the material that was used between the paintings and the manuscripts or the text? Do we know of anything of the medium that was used?
Medium in the sense the palm leaf and paper, or
the ink, whatever ink
the device.
See, in terms of the script, they used all different, most of the text that I have come across is written in black ink or with gold letters also, right? Gold was used very, very profusely. Whereas I have not come across any other color which was used, sometimes red also, but black, red, and gold. That was mainly used by the scribes. But of course, the artists used all the other colors, black, pearly white, yeah, green, blue, lapis lazuli I spoke about. Yeah,
Beautiful.
yes, yeah.
Right.
They were
Where would you place the earliest Jaina manuscript with paintings, with respect to, let's say, the Buddhist manuscript, similar time period, older?
similar time frame. That's why I showed you that Ashtrasastra Prajna Paramita, that manuscript. It's almost, parallel. But the extant manuscript, which is illustrated, I will still say 11th century, yeah, or early 12th century, yeah. But it's almost similar time period, yes.
Right. These manuscripts seem to have been pretty well preserved over a period of time. Do we know, or what do we know about any preservation techniques, or how they were preserved well over the several centuries?
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, in fact, sorry, to add to that, do the colors really look as bright as they
As
were in your
bright,
photographs?
yes,
Okay.
as bright. The gold shines as
Oh.
they appear in the
So
picture.
they're
Yeah.
not, they're preserved really
They're
well because
preserved
they have not
really
even
well.
dimmed.
And if you recall, at the beginning of the lecture, I spoke about the Bhattarakas. I spoke about the Jain libraries. And also, I should tell you, we spoke about the Panch Kalyanak and Gyan Kalyanak. And I said that you and me, we can also become Tirthankar. It's not that somebody from outside this cosmos is coming down and appearing as Tirthankar. So what is the mainstay of the religion? It is the knowledge, the omniscience that the, Tirthankar attains, right? And so there is lot of emphasis on acquiring knowledge in Jain religion. That is the mainstay. In fact, the Namokar mantra, when we talk about who are we venerating, the different stages of human beings in their quest for knowledge, the acharyas, upadhyayas, arihantas, the siddhas, right? So with this background, there was a total devotion to attaining knowledge. And because of that, as a result of that, there were so many of these Jain libraries, the Bhandars, were instituted. And these Bhattaraks, continuously they encourage people for more and more donation. They told them that, okay, you will, earn a lot of religious merit by doing this kind of Shastradan, by commissioning of the manuscripts. And different texts were being copied all the time in the form of these manuscripts. And in fact, this particular sentiment reached such a high, fervor that there was a lot of competition between the different Jain Bhandars. And it was not only that they were storing Jain texts or anything related to Jain religion. If you go to most of these Jain Bhandars would have all other religious texts also, secular texts also. There are Persian texts, there are translations of, Persian texts into Prakrit or vice versa in that sense. So there was this lot of emphasis, and right from, I would say, 12th, 13th century, we know of these Jain Bhandars. And there were special people who were appointed for the upkeep of these Jain libraries. And they really knew how to take care of these. Even today, if you go, there are these Jain Bhandars, they are all operational. Besides, some of these, manuscripts or the paintings, which are kind of spread over different museums and in personal collection. But by far, even today, they are all stored. They are in the safe custody of these Jain Bhandars. And that's one reason that I'm sure they employ very, very sophisticated conservation, they employ these conservation practices, which have, which are like we are witness to the great upkeep of these manuscript paintings and the folios. Yeah. I mean, I'm
The
not a conservationist, so I
Mhm.
wouldn't know what technique they employ, but I can definitely say this, that, yeah.
You spoke about the text being mostly in Prakrit and in Jainanagari script. What were they inscribing in these texts? Was these were these verses from the Kalpasutra, or was this a commentary on the paintings and the
Both,
episodes that they were
both.
depicting? What was that?
So, see, as I showed you one first palm manuscript, palm leaf manuscript, Shatkhandagam. No. So, Shatkhandagam is a Digambar text, which was kind of compiled or written, I would say, in the 2nd century. The image that I showed you was that from a commentary that was written on Shatkhandagam, much later, around 9th century or 10th century, right? So that was a commentary where it was, there was Prakrit and it was intercepted by Sanskrit also, right? Then later texts, say Kalpasutra, they are, so there are 3 parts of Kalpasutra. There is Jincharit, then there is Sadhu Samachari also, and then one section talks about the lineage of the Sangha, right? Like from Mahavir, how different his main disciples, and then from there on, how it carried on. So these are the 3 portions. So the Jincharit talks about the life story of the Tirthankar, all the events that happened. Then Sadhu Samachari will talk about the conduct, how the sadhus or the monks, the acharyas, they are supposed to carry on during the rainy season, the Chaumasa, the 4 months of the year. They are not supposed to travel. They are supposed to stay in 1 month. And what all they are, they are supposed to do. Or if it is a female monk, how there are some exceptions, in terms of her conduct, etc., etc. So, as I said earlier, most of the Kalp Sutra and the other texts, there was really no direct relationship between what the text was saying and the image that was being portrayed on the manuscript folio. The image of the Tirthankar, or probably his parents, or any other scene, was purely for devotional purpose. So there was not a narrative which was being, carried on through these images. But later on, when we talk about, say, Yashodhar Charit, there is a narration and there is an image. There is a continuous, there's kind of continuity. Like that also was a very, I would say,
Even in that Kalka Charitra or whatever.
Kalkacharya Katha also, right? Kalkacharya Katha, I would say, because it's a non-canonical text. So you could again have that narration. There was no, that devotional aspect was not there when we are looking at the Kalkacharya story or the images there, right? So yeah, but later on, say when we are looking at Yashodhar Charit, there is a direct relationship. Okay. Whatever the Dharmakatha is saying, that story is being depicted on the folio. Yes.
The one inference I was able to see, and you need to tell me whether this observation is correct or not. In the Buddhist narrative panels, like for example, Mahakapi Jataka in Ajanta, there is the same story that actually evolves through the panel. But largely, again, I use the word very carefully here, with the exception of, let's say, Kalka Charit and a few other non-canonical texts. Is it fair to say that most of the Jain paintings, the narrative goes from one part of the Tirthankara's life to the next one? It is not 2 events that are near to each other. It is, for example, there could be like a Kaivalya Kalyana to the Moksha Kalyana, right? Which could be spread several years apart. Is it fair to say that most of the Jain paintings narrative meant continuity from one part of a person's life to another? The jump was bigger. Is that a fair statement?
Yes, you can say that. But at the same time, there are other stories also. Like you have the story of the hawk and a pigeon. So Shantinath, right?
Hmm.
In one of his earlier births, like the same story is being depicted, that there is a hawk who comes and claims the ownership of the pigeon and etc. So those are all narrative stories. But when we are talking about the Tirthankar's life, definitely I will agree with you. And sometimes different folios will have different kalyanakas. But when we are looking at the bigger I would say field, the field for the artist, like there are many wooden patlis that will talk about the entire life story of the Tirthankar, right from Garb Kalyanak, Jan Kalyanak, Diksha, etc. Everything is present on one particular panel. So probably that you can say it is it's a narrative in that sense. Yeah, without giving a break. But you're very right. It spans a great time period, I would say that. Yeah.
Yeah, I had a small question to ask you. When these manuscripts were copied over a period of time for retention and everything, what did they do to the art? Did they copy the art also faithfully, or did they have new artists to draw?
See, from the earlier manuscript till the middle of the 15th century, I would say. Of course, the artists would always change, but at the same time, they were so hidebound about the the way it should be done, the painting, that they did not deviate from it. As I gave that example of those roundels, those red dots, although in paper manuscript you don't need them, but still to maintain that sanctity of the older tradition, they continued, making those dots in place of the holes that the palm leaf folios required. Yeah. And of course, then later, towards the Mughal influence, then you saw there was a total change slowly. Yeah.
The size itself changed.
Size changed, everything changed then later, because there was so much of migration of the artist.
Yeah.
So see, Humayun only brought 2 artists, no, from outside. All right. Then, of course, during Akbar period, the Mughal atelier really grew in large. This thing, there were a lot of artists. Most of the artists were local.
Yeah,
They
in
were,
fact, even architecture, if you see during
architecture
Akbar's time,
also.
it's
Yeah,
very
yeah.
obvious that
The
Hindu craftsmen were.
Indo-Islamic architecture, that's how it came into being. Yeah, right. So those artists, they were employed in the Mughal ateliers. Their disciples, their sons, whatever, of course, they would also kind of learn the same technique their fathers are being trained into. And then there was a backward migration also, no, after the fall of the Mughal Empire. So, of course, those characteristics of the Persian painting or Mughal painting, they stayed with the artist. And the new Kalpasutra and the other texts were then rendered in the new style in that sense. Yeah.
Thank you very much. This has been really an illuminating
Thank you.
learning session for us. My mind went back to when you were showing pictures of the Patan Patola. My mind went back to 12 years ago when several of us at Tamil Heritage Trust visited Patan, and we actually spent some time at the Patola weavers and
the Salvis. Yeah.
So some of the pictures that you showed, got us.
It's very interesting how trade, commerce, the culture, everything is reflected, through these paintings. Yes.
It's also amazing how they captured the textile details so beautifully.
Oh, yes. Oh,
like,
yes.
Really.
Yes.
Like, I mean, that is one post. They were not so true to human anatomy, but they were really true to the textile pattern.
Yeah. Because also look at the patronage, no? Where
exactly.
So that's the reason. Yes.
Yeah. Thank you, Dr. Jain. That was really, really extremely nice. And really, as I said, it expanded our ignorance in our own eyes and how much more we need to. Yeah. And thank you, Kishore. I think we'll just quickly move to the second talk of the day. Yeah. So the second talk of the day is titled Line and Color, Early Painting Traditions in Palm Leaf Paper and Scrolls, and is being delivered by Dr. Navina Najat Haidar, curator, Metropolitan Museum of Art, New York. While monumental murals often attract the greatest attention, many of India's most influential painting traditions flourished in portable formats. Across centuries, artists transformed palm leaf manuscripts, paper folios, and painted scrolls into vehicles of storytelling, devotion, education, and artistic expression. These traditions played a crucial role in preserving and transmitting literary, religious, and cultural knowledge. They also provided the foundation upon which many of our later schools of Indian painting developed. Dr. Navina Najit Haidar, in her lecture, will explore the visual language, materials, techniques, and artistic innovations that shaped these early portable painting traditions. Keep it about the speaker. Dr. Navina Najit Haidar is the Nasir Sabah Al Ahmed Al Sabah curator in charge of the Department of Islamic Art at the Metropolitan Museum of Art, New York. An internationally respected scholar and curator, she has organized several landmark exhibitions, including Sultans of Deccan, India, 1500 to 1700, Opulence and Fantasy, Divine Pleasures, the Kronos collection of Rajput painting, and the forthcoming exhibition, Jahangir, Emperor Connoisseur, Naturalist of the Mughal Age. She is also the author of Jali, Lattice of Divine Light in Mughal Architecture, and has contributed extensively to the study of South Asian and Islamic art. Through her scholarship and curatorial work, Dr. Haidar has played an important role in bringing the artistic traditions of South Asia to global audiences. A very warm welcome to you, Dr. Navina. We are delighted to have you here. I now invite you to take over the screen and deliver your lecture.
Thank you. Thank you so much for this warm welcome. And thank you for this invitation to speak at such a distinguished forum. Simply making the required adjustments right now.
Yeah, we can see your screen. Yeah.
Okay, good. Thank you. So, as you kindly introduced, I'm currently working on an exhibition on the patronage of the Mughal Emperor Jahangir, who was the fourth Mughal emperor, ruling in the early part of the 17th century. This invitation to speak about palm leaf paper and scrolls was, for me, an opportunity to meander towards Jahangir through these other media and through the idea of line and color, because essentially my world is one of painting on paper, the great movement of paper across the world, what it offers as possibilities for artistic expression, for the production of books, luxury manuscripts, practice papers, all kinds of developments have taken place, cultural and social, and of course, artistic developments around paper. And that's the majority of the works of this period of Mughal art that I'd be looking at. But I thought it could be nice for us to make our way to Jahangir's era through some of the other things that open up our minds and our responses to the wonder of paper, of palm leaf, of scrolls that are transformed by the application of line and color. And so I'm really going to take you on a little journey before we get to Jahangir. And I thought we would start with line. So for me personally, when I discovered the drawings, you can call them cartoons, they're really extraordinary images, often executed in a single line by the artist, the Romanian-American artist Saul Steinberg, who was an illustrator for the New Yorker magazine. And he called himself a writer who draws, and showed us the power of expression with just a single line on a simple white sheet of paper. And here's one of those drawings that Saul Steinberg did. I think he died in 1999. And here you have a lady sitting on a stool, sipping a drink late in the evening, probably. You can sense her mood, you can sense her appearance, her posture. Everything is conveyed through the almost single line that moves across the page and is so incredibly expressive. For me, as an art historian, just the wonder of that line and its expressive possibilities is ever unfolding in almost every medium that I look at. And for me, art is really about drawing. It's about expressing through this kind of powerful creation of shape. And I think Jahangir appreciated line too, as I hope to be able to demonstrate. But let's continue with just awakening our minds to all the possibilities of different types of line. And this is really based on an article I wrote some years ago called Line. And I published some of these works. This is extraordinary work by a South African artist named William Kentridge. If you know his work, you'll know that he's one of the most amazing thinkers and bravest people in the art world, in that he took on all the themes of society, and again, took them on with the power of a single line sometimes, or brush strokes. In this case, he's created a cat, the image of a cat, and at first glance, you think it's a series of lines just brought together. It's called Scribbly Cat. It's almost amusing. And you look at it a little bit more, you contemplate it, you realize it's actually quite sinister. And then as you look at it some more, you realize it's either terrifying or is terrified. And the power of his expression takes you into that political world that he was confronting through his artistic expression. This is a painting, a watercolor we have at the Met by, I think it's an Israeli artist, whose name is Michael Rovner. And he created this work. He died in 1998. And this work is an almost spectral line, a white spectral line between two darkened areas. And when you go into the context, you realize it is the border between the states of Lebanon and Israel, a contested border, a lonely place for a figure to be walking, a place of mysterious character even. And that's the feeling you get, again, from this very simple and stark possibility of a line, more or less. Zarina Hashmi, a very well-known Indian printmaker, created a set of works which are very celebrated now. They're known as Home as a Foreign Place, where she created a set of, I think it was 24 woodcuts, and they were all elements of a house that were deconstructed and broken down to their absolutely simple elements. And in this case, you can see a simple line angled at the base of the page with the words in Urdu that say chaukat, meaning the threshold. And this is why Zarina is such a beloved artist for many admirers, collectors, museums, and just art lovers, because she takes you, has the capacity to use the language of minimalism to essentialize experiences and memories even of spaces and features of households, such as in this case. So these are really some modern works that I think of and I keep close because I find them strong when I'm approaching the question of Jahangir's world. But Jahangir's own world really evolves from a combination of long-standing Indian traditions, European traditions, and traditions of the Islamic Middle East. And probably the most important of those in terms of the power of the line is, of course, the calligraphy, the calligraphic expressions that evolved in Middle Eastern art from the 7th century onwards, with the rise and the importance and the beauty of the holy book, the Quran, which is for the Muslim artistic imagination, there is no greater art than writing the words of the Holy Book, and therefore the art of calligraphy, executed often again in simple line on paper or vellum, is the great art form. And here you see in the Met's collection a page from a Quran manuscript from North Africa, which is known as the Nurse's Quran because it was commissioned by a female nurse of the Sultan, and it has a sort of what they're beginning to call it's something known as a Maghribi or Western style of calligraphy, where the shapes of the letters are executed in a certain way.
Navina, can you just be a little louder?
Oh, yeah. Okay. All right. Can you hear me better?
Yeah.
Can you hear me better? Yeah. I'm
Yeah,
not.
yeah.
All right. I'll try. I'll try.
Yeah, yeah.
So,
I think you're better now.
okay. All right. So, So I've sort of shown you a few things. We've dwelt a little bit on the concept of the line. I had promised a scroll and a palm leaf, so I think I owe you that from the title of the talk. Okay, so scrolls are very interesting because they obviously offer an artist or a writer a long extended surface upon which to create. And the very format requires a certain type of approach to decoration and to content. So we have here on the screen a scroll from the period of Akbar, of Firman, one of the most classical scroll forms in the Muslim courts and the Hindu courts of India, but globally the Islamic courts, was this format of a Firman, which is basically an order and requires a long text above which there is a headpiece. In the Ottoman world, it's a tughra, or the signature of the Sultan himself. In this case, this is an Akbar period firman, you actually have the image of a temple shown at the top of this page with his seal. The contents of the order, which must pertain in some way to some land or some favor or some recognition given. It hasn't yet been fully translated, so that's a project we're working on, translation and interpretation. But you can see the possibilities of a scroll and how it works. It's a long format, and you of course have pilgrimage scrolls in the Jain tradition. You have pilgrimage scrolls in every tradition, including pilgrimage to the Holy Lands of Mecca, Medina, from India, Deccan ones that show you the long journey that you're supposed to take from South India all the way to the Arabian Gulf area. So scrolls are very useful and important, and you would, of course, using them, manipulating them, reading them, unfolding them, that's a whole separate consideration. And of course, we must keep in mind the Far East Asian scroll traditions and how the actual handling of a scroll goes, I think is a hugely important thing. And it's not really the subject of my talk today, but I do want to allude to it. Palm leaf is a very special kind of a surface on which you would execute line. It's a harder surface than paper, and you can see that the palm leaves themselves, the palm elements of the palm are dried and formatted to receive a line and sometimes color. And here we have a pair of palm leaves from a manuscript which is in the Cleveland Museum of Art. It shows a figure who's performing prayers to Shiva in order to get a divine woman. That's his aim. And so these prayers are being executed by him. But let's have a look close up at what it feels like. You can immediately sense through the things that I've shown you how differently the line is applied and how it works, how it's been applied and what effect it gives. And I think these palm leaf paintings, some of them, can be the most lyrical of all, and I admire them so much for their lyricism. And this one is wonderful, where a figure is plucking blossoms from a tree for the puja, and the trees themselves are filled with movement, and each of those, the line is outlined in a very special way. Another detail shows deer, spotted deer, probably some kind of a cheetah, which are pulling leaves off the trees. So this kind of, the best parts of these paintings, artistically speaking, are often in the little details of nature and in the details of, the incidental details rather than the central narrative. That's where the painter or the artist takes tremendous joy in creating images through the application of line. So really at this point, I've said nothing much about Jahangir, but I hope you'll see that looking at this material makes our eyes and our hearts, awaken to what's possible and what impressed Jahangir, because he was incredibly sensitive to art and to color and to line. Let's stop for a moment on color. Color is, for me as an art historian, and I think for us creatures of nature, the most extraordinary gift of nature. I mean, how can we even explain the joy of color? Not just for us as humans, but for all creatures. But artists have been particularly responsive, some of them, of course, not. And I love the wonder and the purity of no color on a paper, as much as I love something like this. And I'm showing you David Hockney because we've just this very week lost one of the great artists of the world. That's David Hockney. He died just 3 or 4 days ago. He's a British painter who really embraced so many things, radical subject matter at a time when those themes were not safe even. And he embraced color with a kind of upliftment and basically the feeling of the British countryside in works such as this, which I think are, much to be remembered right now and will be missed because the source of their production is now not in this world. But when you think of color, the Indian tradition, painting traditions, has basically, you can boil it down to 2 fundamental tendencies as far as color is concerned. One is the application of blocks of pure pigment or color, and that is the famous so-called Indic tradition. And you see this in a Malwa painting of the late 17th century. It's a love scene in a interior space. The palette, yes, there's some Mughal influence, yes, there's some Sultanate influence, but really it's the Indic tradition that goes back a very long time, probably back to some of the Jain paintings and the manuscripts that we looked at just before in the wonderful talk that just preceded. And you see, it's a very ancient way of doing things. Color blocking is what designers would call it today. But when we look at it, and we see essentially what the artist does, he subsumes the scene, absolutely unafraid, in flattened shades and areas of color. And that color expresses the mood, it expresses the theme of the painting. And it's a very strong and also technically a particular way of approaching color and applying it on a page, on a paper. Now, this is quite different from the tradition that comes into India in the Sultanate, and especially in the Mughal period, which comes in from Western Asia. And that is to do with the blending of colors, the creation of hues that come out of mixing colors. And this, for example, is a page, the Met has a wonderful page from the Shahnameh of Shah Tahmasp, who was one of the great patrons of the early 16th century in Tabriz. He was the one from whose court the 2 painters came from Iran to India in the Mughal period under Humayun. And here you have a painting showing a conflict with 2 thieves. I mean, I'm really actually showing it here for the very particular way in which the color has been developed. So you could see that the mountains that you see are blended shades of purple, pink, and green. The sky is actually gold. And of course, there are areas of pure pigment, such as the lapis lazuli, costumes and certain pigments that are applied, but you can also see tremendous facility of blending. And so these two aesthetics, if you like, one of pure color applied in color blocks, and the other of these blended colors, which soften and change and give us possibility of modeling and shading, in addition to all the kind of European hatchwork and engraving techniques that were being seen by Mughal artists in the 16th century in non-colored prints. You also had this possibility of shading and toning, which comes about with this blending. These two aesthetic traditions, along with the kind of extraordinary possibility of line, just the power of a simple line, are things that meant a lot to a sensitive patron like Jahangir. So let's enter Jahangir's world a little bit. Jahangir, I've characterized him as emperor, connoisseur, and naturalist. These are three aspects of his patronage. He ruled from 1605 to 27 in India at a time when the Mughal Empire was still more or less confined to northern India, to parts of Afghanistan, or really the great northern plains. It hadn't quite come into the south as it did later on. But while his reign started in 1605 as emperor, he was born in 1569, and so he really became emperor when he was almost 30 years old. In those first 30 years, which in that period was almost a lifetime, he was a patron as a prince, as a rebel in Allahabad, where he set up court in 1600. And we also wonder what he was doing before that rebellion when he was a younger prince. And because as a sensitive art patron, as somebody who truly loved painting more than maybe anything else, and because we know that because he tells us that in his own memoirs, we wonder still what he was really patronizing as a young man, let's say of about 20 or 22, we don't know. Now, I mentioned the Jahangirnama. That's his memoir. It's one of the most important texts of Indian history, of world history, I would say, because it is an extraordinary, frank, engaging autobiography. I would encourage anyone to read it, and you will accompany the emperor as he goes across the empire that he's inherited from his father. In his time, there wasn't much action. There wasn't much conquering and so on required. He'd inherited this great empire. What he did then was to enjoy it, to know it, to learn it, to travel it. And so he's a very peripatetic king, and he talks about his own life throughout, his thoughts and so on. Now he mentions his own birth, and he says, God brought me forth into existence from the recesses of the unknown. And we know that he was a longed-for son. When Akbar wanted to have a son and he was unable to have a son, he went to Sheikh Salim Chishti's shrine, which is in Fatehpur Sikri, and begged the saint for a son. He was rewarded with 3 sons, the oldest of which was Salim, named after the Sheikh Salim Chishti. And that is Jahangir's princely name. He became Jahangir, which is his title, which he gave himself when he became king. But as a prince, his name is Salim. And this is the shrine of Sheikh Salim Chishti, which is an extraordinary, wonderful place in Fatehpur Sikri, a living shrine. When Akbar was rewarded with the son in the Akbarnama, which is the great chronicle of his reign, written by Abul Fazl, he mentions that he took a vow. He had taken a vow before he was given a son. He said he would go on foot to pay homage to the Sheikh, to thank him for the gift of a son. And in the Akbarnama, you actually have a painting by Basavan, one of the great painters of the period, that shows Akbar dismounted from his horse and taking a 370-kilometer walk to the shrine of Sheikh Salim Chishti to give thanks for the birth of his son, Salim. Now, In the Akbarnama, the birth of Salim is one of the important things that happens to Akbar. It's not Salim's story alone. It's Akbar's story, of course, as the father, as the emperor. And therefore, the episode is actually illustrated several times. There are several versions of the Akbarnama. And I think sometimes it appears even twice in the same Akbarnama. But on the left, you see a painting of about 1595, perhaps earlier, in the Akbarnama, the same manuscript that I showed you a page of earlier. This is the great Akbarnama, which is kept in the Victoria and Albert Museum. And on the right, you see a page from the Jahangirnama, which is Jahangir's story, autobiography, which I told you about, in which he describes his own birth. Essentially, in both of these paintings, it's the birth story of Jahangir. But you will see that there has been a quantum leap in the painting style, in the way the subject is approached from the time of Akbar, who had it illustrated by Keshav Kalan and Dharam Das on the left, to Bishan Das, to whom the painting on the right is attributed. So let's just look at the painting on the left, and you will see that it's a scene of great festive joy. In the inner portion of this palace on the left, you see that there is Akbar's mother who's lying down, Jahangir's mother lying down. She was the Rajput wife of Akbar. She is mistakenly known as Jodhabai. Her real name was probably Harkabai, and she was from the house of Amer, and she was given the royal name of Maryam az-Zamani. So she's just given birth to to Jahangir, I'm sorry. And she's surrounded in that little chamber with her maids. And there's baby Jahangir in the arms of a maid outside. But all in this area of women, you can see it's the women's quarters. As you step out of that area, there's a lady at the door presenting sweets. You see there's a whole lot of musicians in the outer courtyard, and they're blowing different kinds of instruments and playing drums, celebrating the birth of this baby. And then right outside there is the common population. There are different levels of hierarchy shown here. The great joy shown in the villagers, the wandering mendicants, the courtiers. It's a joyful painting. You can download it online, and that's what I want to really impress, is that all these works that I'm showing you are all available online. And one of the great things that we have accessible to us now are digital images. We can simply download them, open them up on our screens, and enjoy them in full detail, and have this extraordinary view into history and into artistic creativity. So that's what's happening in the Akbar period, and the figures are very detailed and so on. Yet there is not that much of a sense of individualization in comparison to what you see on the right. On the right, you see Harkabai. Now, she's supposed to be a Rajput. She's got a certain look, she's been individualized to look like a Rajputni. Baby Jahangir has been born there. Now he's born with his halo intact. You'd have to take my word for it, because the detail will show you that. Sitting on this chair next to her is a woman, probably one of the senior Central Asian women of the court, who was there, Hamida Bano Begum. And so these are great characters of history. Bishan Das in 1615 or so would never have seen them, but he's imagining a scene and making it feel more real than the scene that actually took place at the time, much more individualized, much more naturalistic. Even these figures outside the door, outside the thing, you see that there are these astronomers. They're all casting the horoscope of the royal baby, and each one of them is interacting with each other. They're showing great thought and concern. And the level of individualization is greatly increased. That is because what's happened between the Akbar period and the Jahangir period is a leap towards a greater naturalism, which has come about in Mughal painting for various factors. One of them, they say, is the access to European subject matter, which was, the vehicle for humanism that was coming across from Europe. But there are other factors. I think the rise of the individual artist, the way individual artists approach subjects is also part of it. Let's have a closer look just to get right into that space. I don't know if you can see baby Jahangir with his halo. You can see his golden crib. You can see the individual faces of all these characters as imagined by Bishan Das in 1610 or 15 or so. A wonderful scene and also extremely informative, just as the first one was. But really what I'm trying to show you is the evolution of Mughal painting across this period. Now, I mentioned that Jahangir then became a rebel. I mean, he, for the first 28, 29 years of his life, we're trying to, for the exhibition that we're doing, build up some kind of account of what his patronage was. Probably one of the most important things that he started in this period was something called the Gulshan album, which I'm going to show you pictures of. But it is really when he gets to Allahabad in circa 1600 that where he set himself up as a rebel prince, and he even sometimes takes the title of Badshah himself, rebelling against his father. That's where we begin to see a lot of new materials that are being made for Jahangir. On the screen in front of you is one of the most important cultural and artistic, I would say, developments, which is the illustration of the life of Christ, the Mirat al-Quds. This is a text that was composed for Akbar by an important Jesuit figure, like the person on the right. The portrait here of a Jesuit priest that you see on the right is actually from an album made for Salim in Allahabad, known as the Salim album. So this would be around 1600 or so. He might have collected it from an earlier painting by Keshav Das made for Akbar, or some people say that he was having this made, I mean, this images of Portuguese were being made for him too. On the left, you see the manuscript of the Mirat al-Quds. There were 3 versions of this known. One of them is in the Cleveland Museum of Art, and that's the one that I'm showing you. Jahangir was very interested in the life of Christ. His mother's name was Maryam, her royal name, Maryam az-Zamani, Maryam of the age. And in Islam, Maryam is venerated, so is Jesus. Jesus is considered one of the prophets. So there is a great cultural affinity. This was, of course, in India, a very important time of cultural debate, cultural exchange, the exchange of religious ideas. And all these figures, these texts, these paintings had a role to play in articulating these ideas and spreading information. In fact, what's interesting about the Mirat al-Quds, for Christians who are familiar with the story of Christ in a certain way today, is that the episodes illustrated for Jahangir are actually quite different from the ones that most Christians are familiar with today. So I'm sort of interested to see what it's going to be like in the exhibition when we present Christ through the eyes of the Indo-Muslim world, the life of Christ. With Jahangir, from a very young age, was the brilliant young artist, Agha Reza, was an older artist, Agha Reza, and his brilliant young son, Abul Hassan. And the drawing on the right that you see is by Abul Hassan, son of Agha Reza. Agha Reza came from Iran and served Jahangir. He joined Jahangir in 1586-87. His son, Abul Hassan, became one of Jahangir's closest artists, and Jahangir proudly said he's Khanezad, he's born in the house born. That was a kind of particular point made about some of the artists. What you see on the right is Abul Hassan copying the artist Dürer, making a Christian image. And what you see on the left is a dagger, a nephrite dagger with a similar sort of head, possibly a head of Christ, possibly a European head of unidentified, identity, unknown identity, but with that curly hair and those features. These are all bits of evidence that show you how the European style was coming into the Mughal period, very specifically, with very specific artists, and how these styles moved beyond painting and drawing into the world of fine arts, decorative arts, or maybe they came the other way. We have to keep our minds open about this. But this is quite extraordinary. Abul Hassan was very young. I believe he was only 13 or 14 years old when he made this drawing of tremendous distinction. It's in the Ashmolean Museum. Now, in Allahabad, actually, Jahangir didn't have access to all the full gamut of things that he would have after he became the real emperor. He was in rebellion. He'd set up a small court. He had important artists with him. But while the production is very, very interesting, it's not as slick and, opulent, let's say, as it becomes later on. But what's really fascinating is some of the interesting kinds of texts that were illustrated for Jahangir in this period. This is one of the first texts on yogic asanas. It's a translation, it's called the Bahr al-Hayat, the Ocean of Life, composed by Muhammad Ghaus, the great Sufi saint of Gwalior, who had translated this text originally in an earlier period from a Sanskrit text called Amrit Kund. So it's really been illustrated for the first time here. And apparently, according to yoga experts, this is the first time you see these asanas being practiced and observed. Would have been done sometime before 1604. I mentioned the Gulshan album. When Jahangir was sorry, I'm just checking. Can you hear me properly?
Maybe a little louder.
Yeah. Okay. I can't seem to go louder than this. Is this better?
Yeah, this is definitely, better.
Okay. I really don't know what I can do. Maybe
No, this is better.
Okay. I mentioned the Gulshan album. The Gulshan album is one of the great, still yet unknown treasures of the Jahangir era, because the majority of this album is in Iran. And we hope it's safe right now with everything that's going on in Iran. In fact, in Iran, it has been looked after beautifully for at least a couple of 100 years. And if you visit Iran and you go to the Gulistan Palace, you're lucky to be able to see a folio or two of this magnificent thing. You're just awed at what it means for world civilization, not even Indian or Islamic or European, because it's the meeting of worlds that unfolds in this album. And it's happening in the Jahangir period. It is reflecting the unfolding of the early modern world. You have Europe meets India meets Iran, essentially, in one sort of way of thinking about it. This is a double folio, for example, from the Gulshan album. This one is actually in Berlin, this pair. So I was able to see it and photograph it. And they have wonderful, wonderful images online of this album. So you can go to the Staatsbibliothek website and look at the Jahangir album there. So you see a river running through the two folios. The two folios, which have been a double folio, double spread, are united by this river. And on the banks of the river are mirrored compositions, yogis, wandering mendicants, families of animals that are arranged in such a way they're actually individual compositions, but the mastery of this album is to assemble these together. That's what a muraka in some sense is, an album, to blend and compose and to match. And so the delight of looking is magnified. It is the art of looking, really, that these albums teach you, these great albums. It's not just about drawing them and making the paintings. It's about assembling them, enjoying them, and relating them to the poetry that's often on the other side. And if you look close, to me, the animal studies are the most exceptional on this page, because we know that Jahangir goes on to become a great naturalist, as I indicated in my title. What you can see here on the right-hand side is something I don't think we've ever seen in art before, which is the birth of a newborn calf. Look carefully and you will see that the mother is licking this little calf, and the calf actually still has its umbilical cord attached to it. And it has that extraordinary freshness of new life that has been captured by Basavan, the same artist who painted that birth scene right in the beginning. Basavan is very recognizable in certain moments, and this is one of them. On the left, you see there was a family of cats, and this is the mother cat, so alert, so protective of her kittens. Some of the other figures in that painting, that double painting, are quite extraordinary. These mystical figures who are yoginis, they are people who've abandoned this world, this material world. And then you have that European feeling. You can see very clearly that figures such as these are modeled in some sense on European figures. The types of faces that you see, the way, the naturalism of their faces. And yet, of course, these are Indian figures. There's an Indian person mystic, understood in an Indian way, with ashes that make the skin blue, wearing maybe a Sufi robe. So this is the theme of this painting. Now, this is just one amazing double spread. There were many hundred folios of this manuscript, of this muraka, that remain to be enjoyed and studied and understood. Oh, I just have one more to show you. Actually, this is Jahangir. This is one of the folios that's in Iran. It's actually one of the pictures, shows Jahangir himself seated in a under a tent. But what's really wonderful are the borders, because you can see that the birds are among the most amazing. Each of these specimens is identifiable. If you count the number of birds in this manuscript, there are thousands of birds. And one of the things that you know about Mughal painting is that they always appear in pairs. If you find one bird, you'll always find its mate somewhere else. So you have to hunt sometimes. And sometimes they're hidden in the branches of these golden trees. And you can see in the background, there's a phoenix bird and there's a spotted leopard, all executed in this pale gold with the birds highlighted in color. So again, we come back to the idea of line and color, the contrast of line, in this case, golden lines, and colored birds, and all the marvels of expression that come about when artists are working with full awareness and potential of these techniques. So Jahangir now becomes king in 1605. Akbar has passed away. And I think one of the things to really know is that when Jahangir becomes king, one of the important things he does is to transform the imperial image. The image of the great Mughal is really born because of Jahangir and his incredible awareness of things that are becoming known in the early modern age more generally. One of them is the globe. The globe itself, knowing that the world is a globe, knowing that you can circumnavigate that globe in a ship, as was done by Sir Francis Drake under Queen Elizabeth, and Magellan, the Portuguese traveler before that. These are things that are becoming known to rulers around the world, including Jahangir. So to know the world, to be the concept of a universal ruler or a world ruler was something that all rulers wanted to pretty much be, because they now knew the world. The world was something to know and to rule. And so the symbol of a globe becomes important to rulers all over the early modern age, these cultures that are in touch with each other. Here you see Jahangir standing in a very grand way, and he's holding a globe. This is one half of a painting. I won't go into the other half, but this is the part that I really wanted to show you, how he's holding the globe. Can you see me? Hello?
Yeah, we can
Hi.
see you.
Yeah, we
Okay.
can see. We can
Yeah,
see.
yeah,
Okay,
we can
so-
see.
I'm sorry, somebody called me. You know, the phones and everything is connected, so
No, that's okay, but we are able to
sorry,
see.
I need to get back to my anyway. Can you see the full screen?
Yeah, yeah.
Yes.
Oh, you can. Okay, but I can't see anything. Sorry, I'm gonna have to just see why I can't see anything.
You want to, are you on a phone or are you, I mean,
Yeah, yes, okay, now.
iPad or,
You know, now I can more or less see something.
Yeah,
Let me, I
okay.
hope this works
no,
out.
if you are on a laptop, you can just switch to various screens. You can do depending upon whether you are on a
Yeah, I
Apple,
can see
Mac.
now. If you can see, I can see, so we can
Yeah,
continue.
yeah.
Okay,
Yeah,
all
we
right.
can see. We can see.
So I hope I'm keeping your attention with this globe-trotting moment, okay? Because when we say globalization, this is the moment when it happens. The globalization is literally the understanding of the world as a globe. And so you have Jahangir holding a globe. And in this period, you of course have, oh, goodness. Now it's not moving. I'm sorry.
You will have to come to the specific application that you are using to, do this presentation.
Okay.
If it is a problem, one thing
Yeah.
you can do is to
Yeah.
stop the
Did it-
share and then,
No, it's
Okay,
come.
did you see? Okay.
Yeah, we
yeah,
can see.
it has
Thank you,
changed
thank
now. It has
All right.
changed.
So now you can see that this is a very famous portrait of Queen Elizabeth, who's a rough contemporary of Akbar. Akbar dies in 1605. She died in 1603. They were dimly aware of each other. But it was really in Jahangir's time that the contact with Britain and Europe really increased. We know that Sir Thomas Roe came in his time and so many other figures. But you see that the idea of the globe is something that Elizabeth is also showing, the symbol of a globe. And so this is really my point, being that there is a transformation of the imperial image around the world, and Jahangir is part of that transformation in the Mughal case. Another very interesting aspect of painting that happens under Jahangir and is to do with the imperial image again is the rise of allegorical pictures. Those globes and so on are allegories. They're meant to be symbolic of his ambitions, his powers, etc. And from the brush of Abul Hassan and some other artists, a series of allegorical pictures is created, especially later on towards the end of Jahangir's life, when he was having quite a lot of frustration. One of the frustrations he was having is to conquer the Deccan. That was a dream that Akbar had set. The Mughals had to press down into South India because their prospects in Central Asia, their original homelands, were dwindling. They were weakening. And so the mission was to conquer the Deccan. And that only happened under Aurangzeb in 1686 and 87, when Bijapur and Golconda, but it was finalized, it's completed under Aurangzeb. But before that, for the entire 17th century, there was pressure on the Deccan from the north. And the person who was resisting Jahangir's pressure in the Deccan was Malik Ambar, the de facto ruler of Ahmednagar, who was himself an African of African descent and was a brilliant fighter. He staved off the Mughal army for 26 years with his techniques. And Jahangir was so upset about this that he actually had a dream, a fantasy, that he killed Malik Ambar, that he stood on a globe and the globe rested on a ox and the ox rested on a cosmic fish in the cosmic ocean, and he was handed divine arrows by cherubs in the sky, and he released them from a golden bow and he shot Malik Ambar. There's him pulling him with all of his effort. Sorry, I don't know if you can see. And there's Malik Ambar's head impaled. This never happened. This was just a dream and a fantasy. But this is an allegorical painting of a kind that shows again what the imperial image is developing towards. On the right-hand side, you see a similar idea. Jahangir is standing on the globe, and on the globe rests the lion and the lamb living in peace together. The globe itself is resting on a strange figure which Robert Skelton identified as Manu, the lawgiver of the Hindus, and he rests on a fish, which rests again in the cosmic waters. Cherubs again hand divine arrows over to Jahangir, and he shoots an emaciated naked old man who represents poverty. So these are kind of ideas. Here's a close-up of that. Oh yeah, in the background, for example, you see that chain with the red finials coming down. That is the Zanjir al-Adl, which is something that Jahangir was very concerned about, the chain of justice, which is decorated with yak tails dyed with henna. If any injustice is done, any citizen can ring it and get the attention of the king. How are we doing for time?
You're okay because you started a little late also, so it's okay. You have
Okay.
another 15 minutes or so for your talk, and then we can have the question and answer session. See, because we have time till 8:30 as per Indian time, and we are only close to 8 now. So you have another 30 minutes. Yeah.
Well, I'll speed it up. I'm just, so we are in the middle of the Jahangir era. He's the king. Apart from the Gulshan album, the paintings in Allahabad that I showed you, the next great project, you could say, that he conducted was the illustration of his own memoirs, which I've mentioned, the Jahangirnama. And this amazing text has given rise to about 25 or so surviving paintings of extraordinary quality that relate directly to the text. And on the right, you see one of those important paintings. And I've matched it to the text on the left so that you understand and can see how the two work together. This is celebrating the 15th birthday of Jahangir's son, Khurram, who is the future Shah Jahan. And in a very ancient Indian tradition, the royal family's royalty would be weighed against gold and silver and coins, and those then would be distributed to the needy. And this was a ceremony that was conducted when the future Shah Jahan was 15. And he says, Jahangir, I ordered him weighed against gold, silver, and other customary metals, and the gold distributed to the poor and the needy. Now, if you look closely at this painting, which is in the British Museum, you know, it's a piece of history. It gives you a sense of the lavishness of the Mughal court, the wealth of the Mughal court. The scales themselves are made of gold and studded with gems. The figures that stand around are the luminaries of the court. There's Abdurrahim Khan-e-Khanan standing right behind Khurram. There's Mahabbat Khan, who later betrays Jahangir and goes into rebellion himself. There's Itimad-ud-Dawla, whose beautiful little tomb is the baby Taj in Agra. I think that's Asif Khan, who's the brother-in-law and the son of Itimad-ud-Dawla. Each of them is a known character of the court. When you look closely at the details of this painting, and again, the British Museum has done a wonderful job with the close resolution photographs, you see that the carpet below on the left has got these figures into it. These are probably meant to be. Could we ask for the people to put their mics on?
Yeah, I'm really sorry. I've muted them all. I'm sorry.
Oh.
I don't know how it happened. Okay.
You see on the left-hand side, there is a carpet which shows figures, and this is probably meant to be an imported carpet from Safavid Iran, because they wove them in from the late 16th century. You have figures in the central part of carpets in the Safavid tradition. So it's a guess that it's meant to be. Might have been a local carpet. We don't know. Not many carpets survive of this period. On the right-hand side, again, a detail from that painting. You see there's Chinese porcelains, blue and white porcelains and Chinese figures in the background in those niches. And you also see in the foreground the actual scales that are gold metal with encrusted gems. You can see rubies and emeralds. So this is the phenomenal wealth and not just the wealth that they had, but the fact that the Mughals, and especially under Jahangir now, were connoisseurs of gem culture. They were connoisseurs, collectors of items such as Safavid carpets, such as Chinese carpets. They visualized themselves in global terms. And they took India and the idea of India into a kind of global status, connected part of it and superior in almost all of its productions in so many ways. So it's quite an extraordinary thing. What's also wonderful is the little trays of presents that are being offered to the young prince for his birthday probably by nobles, and textiles that are being offered. And you can see the detail is so incredible that you can you can recognize types of daggers, types of jeweled items, and you can recognize types of textiles, which you can see here. There's like an Ottoman, two textiles here, actually Ottoman imports. There's different types of Indian textiles. There's bandhani. There's all kinds of things to be enjoyed and understood from from the close inspection of these paintings. You can literally spend hours losing yourself in the inspection of these paintings, which is what they used to do back then. Now, as we continue with the Jahangir Nama, which is Jahangir's memoir, you see that his life consisted of these travels, and he visited holy men. One of them was Gosain Jadrup, who impressed Jahangir very much. He was a holy man, a Hindu holy man, who lived in a small cave. And Jahangir describes him as such. He has freed his heart from attachment to material things and turned his back on the world and everything in it, seated in a corner by himself in need of no one and nothing. And Jahangir makes several visits to Jadrup, one of which is captured here in this painting at the Musée Guimet. The pose of Jahangir, this creation of the imperial image, is so influential that it traveled all the way to Europe. So on the left, you see Jahangir in a particular pose. He's standing up. He's wearing two patkas around his waist, meaning two waistbands. One of them is a long sash, which is gilded and sort of brocaded. The other one is a shorter bandhani sash, which he often wore, this double patka. And the fact that he was almost the only one who wore bandhani indicates perhaps that it's a symbol of his Western, his mother's tradition, which comes from Western India, which is where the bandhani was made. And the fact he's holding a long sword, and that's a particular pose. On the right-hand side is a drawing by Rembrandt, made in about 1656, much later after Jahangir has died, but evidently copying this type of image of Jahangir. Now, I had mentioned that Jahangir was a great naturalist, and I'm going to go through this quite fast, but I just want to introduce you to the African chameleon that he had brought into the court and was captured by Ustad Mansour, his great naturalist painter. The turkey cock, the American turkey cock on the left, that came to the court in 1621 and was also captured by Mansour. This wonderful pair of flamingos, which is in a private collection in Bombay. The famous dodo bird, which became extinct in the 1670s, late 1670s, but has only ever been captured in life at the court of Jahangir by Mansour, observed from life, because we know that two dodo birds came in about 1621 and was seen by an Englishman, Peter Mundy, at Surat, and then later one of them at least arrives in Agra. An African zebra, which also was brought in from the western coast. And Jahangir was so surprised when he saw this creature that he writes in the Jahangirnama that he was sure that it was a horse that had been painted with black and white stripes. Imagine if you'd never seen a zebra before and your world was full of horses. You would be very suspicious. So he actually ordered the zebra to be scrubbed, washed, and when he realized that the stripes were actually part of the creature, then he said that it was a work of art by God. He was so impressed. Elephants, on the left is an elephant that he captured in 1614, and that is Alam Goman, And this portrait of Alam Guman is in the National Museum in Delhi. And on the right is Alam Guman, the same elephant, at an earlier stage, at a later stage of life when he's an older elephant. And this painting is at the Met. And I am really bringing them to show you how you can trace the life of a creature, a single known individual elephant from, across 20 or 30 years. And these are some flowers that are copied by Mansour from a European source. I'm going to just speed up a bit because we are pretty much at the end. Yes, I would like to end by coming back to this idea of line and color in the case of the famous image of Inayat Khan. So Inayat Khan was one of the faithful courtiers of Jahangir. He became very addicted to opium. He passed away 3 days after this drawing was made in 1618. And Jahangir was so shocked when he saw his loyal courtier in such a terrible condition that he had him portrayed and mentioned him in the Jahangirnama. He said, whereas painters employ great exaggeration when they depict skinny people, nothing remotely resembling him had ever been seen. Good God, how can a human being remain alive in this shape? And we think it's Balchand the artist Balchand, who's made this drawing. And Balchand has also made a colored version, which is in the Bodleian Library. The drawing is in the Boston Museum, and this is in the Bodleian Library. And when you put the two of them together, you really confront the meeting of and the contrast of line and color on the same subject. And you really come up close and you can see the pros and cons and the diversity of working in line and color. And for some people, the drawing on the right is very, very powerful and can't be matched. The color takes away from the power of the drawing, the agony of the man 3 days from death. On the other hand, the painting on the left has its own, extraordinary appeal. So I leave you with that. We've taken a long journey from where we started, but I hope it's been a way to approach this period, and to approach the kinds of achievements by artists which happen when they and their patron are extremely sensitive and aiming for extremely high results. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ravina. You could stop sharing your screen and we could.
Thank you, Navina. That was really quite amazing. We also, you said not only that the artist and the patron has very high aims, also the exposure to the rest of the world so that they know what is happening in the rest of the parts of the world. And that's an amazing chronology and such an evolution of painting style just in the lifetime of one king. And in probably part of one document, Jahangirnama. That was really, really wonderful. And let's just now move on to the question and answer session. We should continue.
Sure. So you had mentioned about this, you had compared a picture, a painting from the Akbar period versus Jahangir period, right? The birth of Salim. And then one of the differences that you had mentioned was that from a collective celebration, from the focus of group versus focus on individual, right? Is that something that you would, that particular example, was that more of a one-off example, or would you say this for several of Jahangir period paintings? Or is that an example that stands out?
Well, it's a process that starts in the Akbar period. It's not a one-off. It's a tendency. We're going towards that direction. Akbar is the first one who creates an album, commissions an album of portraits based on the individual likeness of people. This was a very radical idea. It had never really been done at any of the Islamic courts before. It hadn't really been done in the Indian courts before. It was something that probably maybe was understood through some kind of European mediation, but some of it is also just to do with Akbar himself, his curiosity about people. The moment, this is the rise of the early modern age. And one of the values of the early modern age and the Renaissance, which is not just exclusive to the West, is the rise of the individual. The rise of the individual is a huge thing in human history. You don't take it for granted. It manifests in so many different ways. In some moments in human history, only some people count. The kings count, the priests count. The average human being, the peasants, hardly ever appear as individuals. The artists are completely unknown. There are many cultural reasons for this, of course. There are other moments in history where the individual comes out because, and in this period, it's really remarkable how much comes out about the artists, the different craftsmen, the different guilds, the different techniques and skills, and then the courtiers, who are they, even to some extent, the women. So we're moving towards that from the Akbar period to the Jahangir period. So it's not a one-off. It happens a little bit, gets going in the Akbar period. By the time you get to the Jahangir period, it's very much the world of individuals. Jahangir talks about his individual artists as painters by name. He cares about them, he interacts with them, he trusts them with his dreams. They travel with him. It's a very deep relationship. The artists express what's inside him and around him. They think with him, they respond to the world with him. So that's what's happening in that sense. So yeah.
I'll pick up a couple of questions that we have from our YouTube audience. Mira Desai has a question. Can you tell us the name of the website where you had a reference to the folio images? You had mentioned that some of these images could be downloaded.
If it's the Berlin album, so Jahangir's Muraka or album is known as the Gulshan album, and it's in several parts. One huge section is in Iran, which is not accessible online. A smaller section is in Berlin, and that is accessible online. I can put it in the chat. The library is called the Staatsbibliothek, and you can just Google it, and you'll be astonished. Let me see if I can just put it into the chat.
You can even put it later. We'll share it in YouTube because what you type here people may not be able to see it.
Okay. All right. Well.
Yeah.
Yeah, if you can send it, if you can just send it in a mail or a WhatsApp to any of us, we'll share it in YouTube.
Okay.
Got it. And we will share it with our YouTube audience. These artists you mentioned about having or starting getting influenced by global themes, European themes. Do we know if they traveled to Europe or to the Western world to be trained in some of their techniques, or was that largely observational?
That's such a good. We don't know that they traveled to Europe. We know that Bishan Das went to Iran. Bishan Das was in Iran from 1613 to 1620 with the Mughal ambassadorial contingent. And there he produced the first ever images of Shah Abbas of Iran. We didn't know what Shah Abbas, even Iranians did not know what Shah Abbas looked like until Bishan Das went there and he created these images of Shah Abbas. And those traveled around the world. Now, there's more contact. I'm just thinking about this right now because there's a very important portrait of the Iranian ambassador to Rome, to the Vatican, dated 1609, which is created by an Italian woman painter. And there's several of these images. More known Persian ambassadors in Europe, very little Indian presence in Europe. Official, I mean, and certainly not artists as far as I know. What was happening though is that the art was coming to India. The reason why the Indians were not traveling is because the whole world was coming to India. They didn't need to go anywhere. You had 5 forces on the coasts, the European presence, you had the Jesuits, you had the impact of the influx of a huge number of European art materials. That doesn't mean that I do wonder if somebody traveled. It's very rare. There's in a later period, there's one character named Muhammad Zaman, who's an Iranian artist, but who might have been in India. He might have gone to Italy and he might have trained over there, but it's still rare.
Well, because the European influence is so dominant, did it just come from observing the art there, which might have come along with other goods or whatever?
There were European artists at the court too. There were European artists at the Mughal court. So, for example, there was a French jeweler named who Jahangir named Hunarmand, and he created a throne with lion legs for Jahangir. He was there. There were many, many European artists there. There were lapidaries, there were probably painters. Later on, under Nur Jahan, there were probably Florentine craftsmen who created the Pietra Dura technique, which leads to the Taj Mahal as well. So there was a huge amount of European artistic presence there. Also, Safavid, Iranian, because we know that in Gujarat, the looms in Ahmedabad mastered all the techniques of Safavid spinning and weave, and that's also something that happens.
So talking about European influences, why, if there was a lot of exchange and, European influence, why were they doing miniatures? Why not large size grand canvases like Europe, which was clearly a major influence?
So the miniatures they were doing were because the format for Indian painting and Mughal painting was albums or murals, handheld. That scale didn't read, that was still the preferred scale, and it goes along with poetry. It's not that the paintings exist just completely independently. They're often mounted in the context of poetry. If the poetry is read, the painting is enjoyed. There's a relationship there between text and image, or sometimes they're illustrations to text. So they're coming out of a book tradition, a handheld book tradition. That's why you have that relatively small scale. Having said that, there were very large wall paintings made in Jahangir's period, and you can see that quite often in the background of his palaces. If you look at the Pachahnama, for example, also all online, you'll see remarkable large European paintings, wall paintings created. And there's a lot of evidence in Mughal buildings, if you look at them, very faded and destroyed mostly, but you see large-scale paintings directly on the walls. Now, were there oil paintings? Yes, there were some oil paintings that were imported, but I don't know that we can say for sure that they were completely comfortable. There's a different mindset. Making your own image or that of known people that big, and there wasn't the centuries of development behind that led to it happening in Europe. There might have been some discomfort with it. There may have been attitudes, hierarchical decisions to be made, tastes and so on.
Right. There's a question from our YouTube audience from Divya. What are your thoughts on miniature paintings influenced by European paintings brought by Thomas Rowe that were worn as jewelry in the courts of Jahangir?
Yes, miniatures. He apparently brought small portrait miniatures, and Jahangir apparently liked one of a woman a feminine one. And some sources say it was Thomas Rowe's wife, probably not true but he gave it to Jahangir, and Jahangir asked one of his painters to copy it. So there was a tremendous interest in these small paintings, miniature paintings, which had become quite the vogue in Europe, the European courts. In the Mughal court in Jahangir's time, these little miniature paintings were actually worn in a format known as shast, and they were either worn around the neck, which you see sometimes, and they were sometimes worn in the turban. Shah Jahan didn't approve of this at all. So when he became king, he, according to an unspecified source, banned the wearing of shast images in the turban, because you're not supposed to bow your head to another human being. You only bow your head to the divine. That's the attitude. So by bringing this worldly element to the head and to sajda, the performance of prostration, it's not considered, in a more conservative viewpoint, it's not considered correct practice. So he was a little more orthodox in that.
Can you tell us a little bit about the paper itself? Like, was there an evolution in the type of paper they used and the painting material? Of course, they were exposed to the European art material. As you said, it came from there. Also, probably those colors, pigments, and brushes. But still, was there a gradual evolution from Akbar to Jahangir's time in terms of the actual material that they used?
Oh, yes, absolutely. Because material comes and changes and it's not static. And paper was hand produced, but what was really important about it was that what is the quality of the fibers, what is the thickness of the page, the burnishing, the the preparation of the wasli, as it's called, is very, very important. There were layers of paper. Sometimes there was even cloth that was treated as paper, as a surface, but it's actually technically woven cotton, and with many layers applied. And then after the painting is done through very interesting and complicated, educated process of using colors, which were kept in little shells and mixed in a certain way. We know a lot because we've seen pictures of artists with these materials. After that was done, a very important step would be to hand the finished work to a burnisher, and the burnisher would take a piece of agate and burnish the whole surface, probably from behind, and create a kind of glossy, jeweled-like perfection to the surface of the painting. So the paper almost became transformed into jewel-like qualities by the time it finished. From where it starts to where it finishes is a big process. So, and it changes over time, and different techniques come about. Practice papers, it was an expensive material. We don't know of many practice papers surviving. I think there's probably more, if you looked on the European side of things, you have more master drawings and great master drawings and practices. Those
Staff
are not,
sketches.
you don't really find them, surviving the same quantity on the Mughal side of things. Why, we don't know. Was it that paper itself was, very expensive, or there wasn't a tradition of saving the practice drawings? Sometimes you find pounced drawings, like, drawings that were traced and then pricked with tiny, tiny holes and then dusted with charcoal-based something to create a copy of something else. Those are known. Those are charba. So those are known as charba. So some things survive when they're very practical, but this whole culture of just drawings is rare. That's why that Inayat Khan thing is so rare. The fact that we have the drawing and the painting is quite a rare thing.
So one more thing, are we to assume that when Akbarnama or Jahangirnama was written, the poetry came first and the sketches came later? Like there were visual representations of the verse?
Yes, I mean the Akbarnama they're both prose. So yes, I mean that's so traditionally it's like an assembly line. If you go to the Persian book arts and the way these things were, there were different people doing different things. So papers, there may be a text would be produced and an empty space left for the illustrator. The person who's a calligrapher would finish his part, pass it to the illustrator. He would finish his part, pass it to, and there were little words, catch words, so that you knew which folio came. When you were doing these massive projects with 200 folios, 300 folios, just to keep track, they had their own little systems, which we now know a bit about. And then, in fact, there's a whole field of codicology, which looks at the production and the manufacture and the making of these codices. Eventually, it gets to a binder, and he has to sew the whole thing together in the right order. Then it goes to the person who's going to put it in a book binding, which is a great work of art in itself. So every stage of this is calibrated and carefully organized, and that's why you have these karkhanas, or workshops, and and there's an order to doing things, and it depends now what kind of text you're talking about. If it's a Shahnameh, it's a certain thing. If it's a poetic text, there's certain kinds of approaches to the selection of episodes, or and if it's a new text, there's more sort of unexpected things happen. And if it's poetry, it's double pages of poetry with independent compositions, visual compositions that don't have to wait for the poetry. But okay, I'll tell you something. With the Gulshan album, you have the poetry in the middle of the page, and then you have borders by later artists that are responding sometimes to the poetry. So even the borders, putting them in borders, is thought about. The whole majesty of the Murakka and the assembly is an extraordinary thing. I'm sorry, not an easy answer though for that.
The Mughal chronicles precede Akbarnama, right? So there is Babarnama prior to that. Do we know if there were illustrations based on the Babarnama?
Yes, there were 5 illustrated Babarnamas made in the Akbar period. So Babur wrote the text, but he didn't have it illustrated. I mean, he was writing the text throughout his journeys across Central Asia and into India, and he goes back to Kabul and he dies. You know, he was in India only 4 years and then he died in Kabul. And his text then became an iconic text of Mughal period, Mughal history. And then it was in the Akbar period that 5 illustrated versions were made.
And
So
what were their, sorry, and what were their influences? Were they influenced by Persian, Arabic, Turkish sources?
So
Or largely Indian?
well, Babur's life story he wrote his text in Turkish, in a form of Chagatai Turkish, and whereas Jahangir wrote his text in Persian. And Babur's travels were across 3 broad kind of canvases. I mean, Central Asia, different parts of Central Asia, South Asia. And Jahangir's travels were mostly in South Asia, but he went up to Kabul too. So they crossed each other's worlds a little bit, but certainly Jahangir seems to have modeled himself to some extent on his great-grandfather's text. Both of them had a tremendous response to nature, the natural environment around them. And Babur describes all the trees he saw, the animals, the craftspeople, the land and everything with extreme sensitivity, and so did Jahangir. The difference between them, to some extent, is owner's pride. For Jahangir, this was his world, it was his kingdom, and he has a certain it's both discovery and connection that you see in Jahangir's text, whereas Babur is more of an observer. There's a
The
freshness to him.
traveler. Yeah.
Yeah, because he's much earlier, he's 3 generations before, and he's just sort of seeing these things for the first time. And, you know, people sometimes compare their reaction to melons and mangoes. I mean, Babur misses the melons that he grew up with. So he never really discovers the Indian mango. Whereas for Jahangir, there's nothing greater than an Indian mango. No melon can compare. And if you sort of look at just the way they talk about those types of fruit, it embodies in some sense their relationship to the place and to their childhood tastes and their connoisseurship really of food cultures, of natural gifts. And that's just as one little example I'm showing. Of course, it's much deeper than.
Does Shah Jahan develop this artistic tradition any further, or does it kind of
Well,
reach a tipping point with Jahangir?
so Jahangir is the most aesthetically gifted in a personal way of all the Mughals to me, I think, because he is so sensitive to the world around him, to nature, to art, to flowers, to fish, to anything. I mean, it's just incredible, all the things he says. And you just every now and then put his book down and think, this is incredible. Like, how can he be so tuned into everything? He really is. You don't get to know Shah Jahan like that. Shah Jahan is the quintessential great Mughal, where his history is not written. He doesn't have an autobiography. It's a grand history, a bit like the Akbarnama, but not written by somebody like Abul Fazl, who was so close to Akbar, or it was written in a much more formal way. That's my impression. People who really read these texts in a much deeper way will have much more to say about them.
But in terms of the artistic tradition, did
Yeah.
Shah Jahan continue what was started by Jahangir?
Yes. Well, yes, I was going to say that Shah Jahan is considered to be more of an architectural genius. His buildings were so extraordinary, and he's left that heritage. His people, when I was a student in all the literature I read, scholars used to make the point that the painting becomes so perfect that it's almost a little stiff and hard. It doesn't have the humanism of the Jahangir world. That's a big difference. Shah Jahan wasn't that close to his painters. He didn't pour over the same materials and take joy in the same, but he produced this image of glittering perfection, which has defined the Mughals ever since. Nothing out of line, not a hair out of place. And that sort of standard was extremely Shah Jahani, and that's why he is, sort of takes over the image of the great Mughal again and transforms it into that. But I think under Jahangir, because of the humanism of the period and because of Jahangir himself, there was something a little bit more relatable for us, maybe as humans.
Thank you. Thank you very much. This has been an interesting lecture, and we continue to develop our own understanding of the various artistic styles as part of this Indology festival. So thank you, Navina, and over to you, Gauri.
Yeah, thank you. And I would say the high point, of course, was knowing that Rembrandt painted Jahangir. We didn't know that till now. So that was something really amazing. Like, we never knew that they painted Indians even at that time. Or that, and that he had actually seen another image of Jahangir. So, like, took his cues also from there. So, yeah, that was really an eye-opener. Otherwise, also, as I already mentioned, the sheer evolution in terms of style and so much of growth in just the lifetime of one king and in one document it was a real eye. And thank you so much.
Thank you.
Really wonderful.
Okay.
And thank you for answering all our questions so patiently.
My pleasure.
Okay.
Thank you.
That brings us to the end of day 3. And I think once again, I'd like to thank both our speakers, Dr. Pawan Jain and Dr. Navina Haidar, for their brilliant insights and engaging talks, which provided so much of information and intrigued us so much too. Tomorrow, we move on to another day, which is titled Painting Traditions of India. We will be looking at 2 regional painting styles, Rajasthani and Pahari, through 2 lectures. Once again, thank you to all our audience. We hope to see you tomorrow. Good night from Tamil Heritage Trust.